Welcome to the Thursday, September 20th, 2018 meeting of the Timberlane Regional School Board. Mrs. Belcher, will you call the roll?
Brian Boyle.
Here.
Lee Doobie.
Here.
Kim Farah.
Here.
Sarah Mockamer.
Here.
Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Kristen Savage.
Present.
Sue Sherman.
Here.
Jennifer Silva.
Here.
Seated at the board table this evening are Assistant Superintendent Dr. Roxanne Wilson and Student Representative Nick Valhouli. The presence of other district administrators as well as Timberlane Teacher Association officers will be reflected in the meeting minutes.
Thank you. And we want to welcome Attorney Kristen Lewis-Savage from Plastow joining us this evening, all sworn in, duly elected, appointed rather. And she's already worked an hour and a half, so she's doing good. So welcome for all of you.
Thank you.
Formally, we all did it privately and informally, but for the record, we're glad you're here. Can we all please stand for the pledge? Mr. Richmond, would you lead us this evening?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business tonight, as you have been aware, Kelly Ward has resigned, and I'd like to propose that we elect Brian Boyle as vice chair of this board. So I'm putting in nomination Mr. Boyle.
I'll make that motion.
You'll second my motion?
You're making the motion?
Yeah, I made the motion. If you don't mind, if you'd second it, that'd be great.
That's fine, I'll second it.
Any other nominees? Dr. Farr?
No, but I have a comment.
Of course.
I think that we should do, I'm in favor of electing a vice chair, but I'm in favor of doing it until the next meeting when we have a full board. We are missing a Sandown rep, to be fair to Sandown, and we do have a new rep from Plastow. So I'm in agreement with the motion, but I would like to amend the motion that we elect the vice chair only until the next convening of the board. That's my amendment.
Do we have a second to the amendment? Second. So we'll vote on the amendment first. Discussion about the amendment.
You would want a convening of a full board, because if we have the next meeting and for some reason
Okay.
3 people aren't here,
Convening of a
correct?
full board,
So
correct.
appointing-
I'll make my motion the full board.
So-
The next convening of the full board.
Are you all right with that, Jen?
Sure.
Other discussion? I personally don't feel that's necessary, but it'll be the majority of the board's vote. So we'll vote on unless there's other discussion, on closed discussion, we'll vote on the amendment first. Dr. Farr's amendment. All in favor? 4, opposed? 3, abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
So the amendment passes, so now we have an amended motion.
Yeah, I'm getting everybody down. Sarah and Lee Doobie were the 3, correct? You're an amended motion, yes.
So the amended motion is to elect Mr. Boyle to be vice chair until such time we have a full board, and then we'll reconsider the vice chairmanship. Is that correct?
Yep.
That was the intent of the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Looks like unanimous.
I'm gonna
Oh, I'm
abstain.
sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
8,
That's okay.
7,
7, yeah.
0, 1. Thank you. Mr. Boyle, would you come up here and sit next to me? Please. Hi.
Hey.
Thank you.
Fun.
Bye, Bri.
Thanks. Nice seeing you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Approval of minutes, if we could. We've got regular board meeting minutes of, oh, thank you, Kim.
Always forgetting some.
September 6th, minutes, regular board meeting. Looks like 4 pages. I had a chance to look at these. I'll give you a chance, and then I'll look for a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. O'Neill, second by Mrs. Silva. Comments, corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 0. Abstaining? 2. 602. Thank you.
Thank you.
Student rep. Good evening, Nick. How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well.
Good. All right. So starting off, I hope everyone's first week's going well. It's looking to be another great year. As you all know, last Tuesday was the tragic anniversary to the terror attack on the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. I heard various stories around the district about just the deep conversations and discussions held by the teachers and their students throughout all classes. So I just wanted to present a big thank you from the whole student body to all the teachers, administrators, and just staff throughout the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools, all around the district for giving us a safe environment to learn and discuss these things and really just prompt us to feel more comfortable. And obviously, another huge thank you to all of our police officers and firefighters throughout the whole district. So thank you very much. And then I guess there's no really easy way to transition, so just jump right into it. Danville Elementary had a cross-country meet today, so I hope it went really well, and you showed the other schools who's boss. They also have another next week, Wednesday the 26th at 4 versus Stratham, so good luck, Hawks. Next Saturday is the Danville Elementary PTA Corn Maze event at 5 p.m. at Kimball Farm in Haverhill, so thank you for the PTA for all your hard work setting not only this up, but every other event that has to be set up in that elementary school. On Tuesday, the 5th grade class at Sandown North have their annual field day at Sandlot, so have a ton of fun. And the 4th grade class has a field trip to the State House and New Hampshire History Museum, which is bound to be a really educational experience and, really exciting. So have a great time there. Pollard School also had their Adventure Lore trip on the 12th, so I hope everyone had an amazing time. At the Kimball Library in Atkinson, a new program has started Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 7:45 called Girls Who Code. For free, all girls grades 5 through 12 can go to these meetings and learn the basics of computer science and programming. You can go to the Kimball Library website for more details. And at the middle school, the 7th and 8th grade open house will be taking place September 27th at 6 p.m. So all parents that have 7th and 8th grade students, feel free to stop by and meet the teachers and get a nice inside look at the school. And on September 28th, the middle school is proud to present Project Navigation. Project Navigation is a day of workshops designed for 7th grade students and their parents at the Northern Essex Community College in order to teach parents about topics relevant to their child's educations. Parents, you can find more details on the middle school website, and this is just obviously a really nice opportunity for students and parents to get together and learn together. And up at the high school, the football team has an away game versus Salem on Saturday at 2 p.m. Girls field hockey has an away game versus Salem at 10 a.m. Boys soccer has a game versus Salem at 10:30 a.m. And girls soccer has an away game versus, you guessed it, Salem at 9 a.m. So if you can make it, please do go support our Owls, not only when they're at home, but when they're away. And finally, last Thursday was the Timberlane Milkmen show, the first ever for this year, and it was, it was hilarious. So I'll make sure to keep you updated on upcoming events, but yeah, it was really funny, so
Could you
congrats.
do a little piece of the show for us? Or?
I don't know if I'm prepared for that. But
Good answer. It's always a good show.
But yeah, so make sure to get out there and support the Milkmen, and congrats to Mr. Pisano for really getting a great show going. So yeah, thank you.
And just thanks, Nick, for that. In our packet, remember, there's the school department reports to us. It's quite lengthy this time because we try to each time have each of the schools give us some of the highlights of what they've been doing in the last few weeks, and of course Nick's a good resource too. But it's great when you have time to look over some of the things that are going on all over the district. So that's in our packet at least once a month, and sometimes both times. Delegates and individuals, we have Mr. Richmond.
Ryan Richmond, President of the Timberlane Teachers Association. I just wanted to take a moment first to welcome everybody back now that we're in full swing of the year. The professionals of the district are quite happy that the heat has finally broken. And we wanted to welcome Ms. Savage to the board and recognize the service by the two members who have resigned since the last school board meeting. Mr. Guide was a very good representative of Plastow. He always put kids before politics or before ideology. And Mr. Ward of Sandown was truly an exemplar of kindness and compassion. The Timberlane Teachers Association wishes both of them well, thanks them for their service, and recognizes that Timberlane as a community is diminished without their leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, current business. So to let our public know, we held a 1-hour public forum regarding the strategic plan. It was a rich discussion. It has been filmed. It was also broadcast. We had some really good discussion and I think very profitable discussion. So what we have now is a strategic plan that we wish to move on to the implementation stage. And so I will ask for a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion to accept the strategic plan as reviewed during the public forum and as amended during the public forum.
So we made a few word changes, and we also added a footnote regarding system of care, so it was a little bit better description for people who pick up a copy of the strategic plan.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Boyle seconds.
Got it.
Any other discussion? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? That is like unanimous. Thank you very, very much. Now, I think if any of us want to jump on any one of those 3 teams that we talked about under the leadership of Susan Rassico, Culture Community, Tom Gary, Facilities, and Christy Michaud will do the curriculum and academic piece. Would you email Roxanne if we could get all the emails going the same place as the point person? She'll get your wants and requirements in. I don't know when they'll start meeting, but then you can get in the loop about perhaps stepping into one of those meetings. So let her know if you're interested in that. Okay, warrant article process. Do we have some information about that?
You have a calendar in your packet, blue. Again, this is the legal calendar for our annual meeting and our budget process. You know, we're starting now, and we go through that process all fall. But the date that you really need to be focused on is that Monday, January 28th. That's when posting warrants for the budget for session 1 and 2 is that date, and I know you're always curious about when it is that very last date for January 28th for posting.
So obviously, we're in charge of the warrant articles that get attached to the budget piece. And so I wanted you to see that calendar, and this will be coming back up as we get closer to those dates, and hopefully have our negotiations complete and ready to think about even things from the strategic plan or even CIP projects that we want to write as warrant articles, including our the capital reserve donation that we've been making there. So just wanted you to see that ahead of time. January seems like a long ways away, and all of a sudden it's right on top of us. I'd love to be able to do some, maybe even a work session of an hour or two. I know we're busy, but as we get closer to write some thoughts down together. We've done that before. We didn't have much last year as warrant articles, but because we have the negotiations coming up, we might want to get ahead of that. So anything else on that? Good? That's it. Okay. We have Mr. Dowd, are you here? Budget?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And what I'm distributing to you is a copy of a proposed budget functionality level and detailed line item changes and a detail of the salary lines as well.
So we've got three documents here.
Three
Jeff?
documents, and I as well will formally welcome Attorney Liz Savage to the table. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And Mr. Boyle, congratulations, of course, back over in the high rent district. I'd expect nothing less. Atkinson types.
It's high rent over here?
So,
He's there, it is. I'll tell you what.
cost me a couple of bucks earlier today.
It's Boardwalk and Park Place.
So, what we're,
Sorry, I just want to pop in here on the salary line detail.
All right, Lizzie, can you make any presentation first, or do you want to just,
Well, I just want to ask.
okay, go ahead.
I just want to ask on the salary line detail. This seems to be more rolled up than the salary line detail that I had last year. Is there, do you want, this wasn't the level, I was expecting more detail here.
it's 12 pages.
I-
How-
But there is a more detailed report.
Okay, what,
The detail that is by person, by school, so that everything is seen.
So it would say teacher 1, Pollard.
It actually
Teacher
says
2,
the
Pollard.
teachers' names on it.
It had the teachers' names on it?
Yes, and it's something that we should, it's important, it has names and positions so that we can see which positions are not filled this year and which are going to not be part of the default budget, and that's not what this has.
or who specifically is in a position?
Correct. So, can we get that?
Well, let me, if I may, and I will get back to your point, especially for new members of the board. A default budget passed in the fall, or sorry, in the spring. And under New Hampshire law, it's not quite a bottom line budget, but it's considered a bottom line budget. So, under law, the school board is entitled to take the funds as they are. And typically, there's a formula that we follow to go from the previously voted budget to a default budget. However, those lines don't always line up with what our current needs are. So there's a case under the town of Hampton, Sullivan, which you had read from, which allows in this case, the school board, to reallocate the funds that are in that budget by line. So we're at a point that we're looking to do that after the summer coming back. And in order to do that, our systems really aren't, and I'll get to your issue because it's a little bit of a system issue. Our system really is not set up very, very well. As you saw last time, with me trying to kind of merge a couple different reports together to be able to produce that kind of information. So, and I know that I was committed to have these documents to you earlier. What I've done, however, is some gymnastics with our system in order to be able to pull for your analytical purposes, because we have year-end numbers, to be able to pull, and you'll see on that first report, budget TRSD, our 17-18 expended, our 18-19 requested, which would have been the original budget request, 18-19 voted, which would have been the voted default budget by line, proposed change, and the 2018-19 proposed final, where this would leave things. The report on top that you see, that computer-generated, system-generated report, is a system-driven report. It did not pick up one line in the report, when it was doing its compilation. So you'll see that the proposed final is off $1,250, but it's within the changes that I'm proposing on the separate sheet. All of that said, what I've also been able to do, and I think, Mr. Boyle, this has probably been something that from the day I started, and we started talking about the budget last year, if you turn to the last page, what I've been able to do is incorporate into that 17-18 expended the actual expenses out of our food service fund, and our federal projects fund, and our performing arts center, which in previous reports had really been a placeholder on the budget side to capture the expense, but I've never been able to get them, and they had never historically been able to be part of this report. So I've been able to incorporate the actuals from those three different funds into this 17-18 expended report. So you get a much better picture, I think, as to what the actual expenditures are. Under gross budgeting, we're required to put together a budget that demonstrates all of the expenditures through any of the funds, regardless of whether they're offset by revenue or not. On the flip side, when I project and forecast revenue for setting tax rates, these expenses, while they have to be budgeted, I also project and forecast that revenue coming in. So there's zero impact to the taxpayers on funds that come in and on expenses that are paid out. However, we've never really had the opportunity to see it from the spend. And you may have seen some reports too, Lee, from Budget Committee. We've never been able to see those lines on the expended side.
Something we've always struggled with.
Right, because we're trying to figure out what to budget for next year and what are those numbers and what do they mean. So I've incorporated them. I've taken some time to try and really get some data and some information to you that I think is going to be useful in looking at the budget, and I'm hoping that this will help to provide a lot more clarity. So that's one of the reasons that this has taken so long. Now, when I prepare budgets for the subsequent years, I take our current positions and I roll them forward. And I'll increment, decrement, depending on what union agreement we have, where the employee is. And that's the information that I'm able to produce onto any salary type reports. So right now, what I rolled into the 18-19 voted was what would have been the then qualifying budget voted by the voters. So it was a budget before that. So the information that's in there are of employees who
Yeah,
were
hang
from
on.
some time ago.
Wait, you need to say that again.
Back up and say that one more time.
Say that one more time.
So for next year's budget, I will take our employees and positions, and I will roll them forward into proposed budget for next year.
Right.
As part of that, and just assume that we're not in it, we have an ongoing contract, I would take an employee at a step where they are, increment them a step for next year on next year's salary schedule for a teacher or any of our union people, for example. So it's a little bit of a process to get and to take and to work all of those into the budget for budgetary purposes. What I had to do with the default is take what was previously voted and copy that forward.
What was previously voted? What year is that?
So if we voted, if we set this in front of the voters in March of this year, March of 18, I would have, for the operating budget, I would have taken positions as of the fall of 17 and rolled those forward for the operating budget. So it would have been the positions as of the fall of 16 that the voters would have voted on. So the data that I have is not incredibly useful because rolling positions forward pursuant to statute requires that they be from that last voted period. I then went in and was able to increment based on step and all of that to make sure that we were covered for any increases in salary by function and object code. But it's not as clean of a process as it would be going forward into the next proposed budget cycle. And even then, it's not 100% accurate because I'm dealing with employees who were there or positions that were there, which by the time the budget goes in, perhaps the employee's left. By the time the budget's implemented, the position's been shifted or moved. So I don't have, I've taken extraordinary measures here to try and get all of our proposed line item adjustments, which you would ask for,
Right.
with rationale,
Right.
which is that second sheet on landscape. No need for glasses tonight.
Thank you.
So you can see a very similar layout, expended, requested. I've also incorporated into this sheet something that I have never been able to incorporate before. And we can get back to the salaries, but if you look the third column over, it says 2019 year-to-date transactions with encumbrances. So the report that we go over every month, the review for our expenditures, shows what our budget is, what our monthly spend is, and then what our spend to date is. Gives us a budget balance, then it shows what the encumbrance is for future expenses.
This is what we've spent so far? Okay.
So you can actually see, for analytical purposes, what we spent in 18, what the requested budget was, where we are on 2019 year-to-date with encumbrances. Then the next column is our voted amount,
Right.
then the proposed adjustment, and then the proposed final by line,
By line, and then the rationale
and then the rationale.
out to the right.
And you can see the report that you had last time, and Attorney Lewis Savage, you've missed. I had to take my glasses off to read the report. It was that small. I had to take my glasses off, put them on. It's very, very.
Sign that got us all.
What's that?
It was the minus sign that got us all, that was hidden.
Oh, yes, yeah. But you can see how difficult it is. This just isn't something we've ever done before in terms of trying to get this level of analytical data together to do it. It's just not really how our system is set up. I've been able to do it. It took quite a bit of time to do it. As far as the positions and budgeted, I don't have the same budget column I don't have the same ability to do that in this budget, because the data that I have in here for a voted default budget is in fact pursuant to statute. I take it, I roll it forward from the year before, it was the last time it was voted, and there it is. So the data that I would have is not in any way valid in relative to
Where we're
Okay,
at.
can we
Where
ask
we're
a
at.
couple questions? We've got
Sure.
three people, I think I have questions now.
I was gonna let him stop speaking, and then I was gonna ask people.
I want to understand something as you're speaking. The 2018-19 requested column,
yes.
that's requested from,
That would have been what budget committee, that would have been the operating budget as requested. So that's not
The
what,
proposed
the
budget.
proposed budget,
proposed
thank you.
budget.
The second column is the proposed budget, the third column is what was the voted budget, which was the default budget.
so our voted budget was more than our proposed budget?
Which,
Yes,
Where are
it
you?
was, in the default,
In the default. it
in the
was.
salary line.
If you're
Well,
just looking at
I'm looking at page 17 of
17.
that budget TRSD. At the very bottom.
With all the totals, you mean?
Yes.
So grand total?
71,759 was requested, and 72,1.
71,759 was requested, but then $1 million was added at deliberative, and I don't think that is reflected here, is it
No.
not?
No. So the amended was a little higher. It didn't pass.
Yeah.
Nothing passed, so we're over here to the actual, what he's calling 18-19 voted. Because I wanted to stop calling it default. This is the budget we have.
Right, no,
This
I
is our
I
budget.
understand, I just thought that the proposed was more,
It w-
in my mind, when I'm thinking of what was on the ballot that I voted on,
that's a fair
it
observation,
was
so.
more than that, so,
And
okay,
in capturing these categories, really, when I look at 18-19, I'm thinking budget committee.
okay. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Oh, I'm ready. I was just thinking about what Jen said. Okay, go Sean. Thank you.
You wanna go ahead, Ken? Do yours.
Sean,
The third column is the 2019 year-to-date transactions with encumbrances.
where are we?
Document
On this,
summary.
the big one?
Landscape, right?
Big one.
Okay, we back over
Legal
this one.
size.
Okay.
The issue that I would see with that column, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is including year-to-date expenditures for this fiscal year that we're currently in, plus last year's the obligations that we have that have not been paid yet. So you're really encompassing 2 years of stuff, and since we don't know what the real true year-to-date is,
There's no real great way to caption or categorize these headings. And when that says transaction with encumbrance, remember how when we were at the last meeting, I said, we're used to looking at this report, which shows the year-to-date or the range-to-date year-to-date with the encumbrances
yeah,
on your year-to-date actual report. That's what this is.
yes, but that it's including obligations from last year, which, to be frank, we shouldn't really care about. If that year is done, it's been closed, yes, we haven't written a check yet to pay for the obligation that we encumbered in that year, but that's a closed year. I like to see where we are in this year, and there's no way to define that in that number because it's a conglomerate of two different topics. Is there a way to print it without the encumbrances? And
From last year, you mean?
pardon?
Without the encumbrances from last year?
Correct. Because then that would truly reflect year to date.
Where we're at.
Because that number distorts, where we're trying to make a rationale. We don't know if we have 10,000, for example, of encumbrances
Sure.
or 100,000.
Yeah, and where they are. That's fair. My purpose of putting this together was to show where we're at overall.
No.
On it. I get your point.
We're making big strides. I definitely agree that we're going the right way. This is the comment on that particular line. Because, we have space, each column's pretty valuable. So, I would want to at least see it, that we puts a lot of thought into having what columns do we want and what's in those columns, what does it represent?
Yeah.
Jeff, isn't that what the budget committee asked the other night? So you're gonna have, because there's not a lot of encumbrances, isn't
There
there?
aren't a lot of
So
encumbrances.
isn't that the topic that came up the other night? That you were
It-
gonna do this and then have like another page of just the encumbrances?
Yes.
I'm summarizing that conversation.
I think that's fair. And I think the thing that we were looking at was for a previous, for a previous budget. So if we were to look at the 17 budget compared to 17 spend, we'd like to see just the 17 voted, right?
Right.
So let's not get the encumbrances that roll over or that we've rolled over from the previous year confused in this case, but there is some applicability to the purpose of that column, which is to show those encumbrances which are in place for the current year's spend. So funds that we've already obligated under the current year. So that is a similar discussion to what we've had. And encumbrances were such a robustly discussed issue last year
Yes.
that I put great effort in this year to try and avoid encumbrances to the extent that I could, by really looking at them and changing the way that we historically have done them to incorporate more into our accounts payable. When something is in our accounts payable as a liability, it actually hits the expense that year, whereas the encumbrances don't. So the encumbrances themselves have come down from where they had been historically. It's not as easy for processing.
Well, yeah, as we get farther away from the
Right.
July 1st date, you're going to be paying those bills as they come in. So, yeah, that number's going to go down.
No, it was the year-end number. And previously, if we had, let's say, $500,000 for which we were obligated at June 30th to pay, perhaps what had happened historically before is we would look at the first or second pay run, or second vendor run after July 1st. So whatever had been paid in July goes into accounts payable. Whatever didn't get paid in July gets encumbered.
Okay.
Because that's truly your accounts payable, right? So, because it
Correct.
clears out in July. But at the end of the day, when I encumber something, I take it out of fund balance. I don't hit the expense for that year. So we had this discussion last year, and so what ends up happening is you don't really get a good picture as to what those expenses are because it never hits that expense line. If I put it in accounts payable, I hit the expense line in the same period, in the same year. If we have sites, terrible example, but sites, if I have 100,000 in sites, if I put 100,000 into accounts payable, which basically means the work's done, I'm waiting for a bill, essentially, or we're largely done, I'm waiting for a bill, I hit the liability and I hit the expense account. So the expense shows, that year's expense show that's in there. With an encumbrance, I simply make an adjustment to our encumbrance line, which is an offset to fund balance. And then it rolls forward, and then the budget moves forward to cover that encumbrance in the following year. But again, we don't get a good picture as to what that encumbrance, what that actual expense line is. I've done a lot to try and reduce our encumbrances and in favor of accounts payable where even if we are gonna pay it in August or September, if I can get it in accounts payable, I can get the expense. I can capture the expense properly. If I encumber it, I don't get to do that. This is just an oddity of governmental accounting. In corporate, we use accruals, it doesn't matter. If it's an accounts payable, that's because it's getting paid in 30 days. Otherwise, it's an accrual. With an accrual, I hit a liability and I hit an expense account. So I know what the expense is in the year that it's incurred, So with encumbrances, it just doesn't work the same way. And because it's not a very, transparent way of working, I'm trying to avoid them as much as possible. So our encumbrances have gone down. Now that I've put everyone to sleep.
I was going to say, couldn't this just be simplified? I think what really it's down to, we're trying to track like a current year expenditure.
Right.
So if you're using last year's money by encumbering it, that should be tracked separately. Then you see
Perhaps,
it.
yeah.
I don't know why it can't be.
Yeah, well,
You're saying it's not very
Not a lot of
many.
them. There's not a lot of them out
a
there.
majority of what's in this column, a significant, overwhelming majority of what's in this column under 2019 transactions with encumbrance, doesn't refer to last year's encumbrance. It's referring to the fact that
this year's
we've got bills that
Current.
we've either paid and we have actual expense for, or we've encumbered the funds so that we are
Through the
no
end of the
longer
year.
able to.
It'll be paid.
Yeah.
To pay them.
Have money to pay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And really, that's the intent
Okay.
of this column.
Kim had a question. I'm gonna let Kim go then, Jen.
I have more than one question, so.
So ask one at a time, because sometimes you run them together, so he can get an answer going.
All right, well, the first is just a statement then I'll ask my
Okay,
question.
statement.
The statement is that, I think what you're saying is that in terms of the salary lines, that you couldn't possibly do that because of, the way this default budget comes into play, but we do know that staff is down by 12 professional staff, 6 admin, and there's 1 position being held. We also know that with the new rules for default budgeting, that we're going to clearly have to identify where those lines are, because those will not be included in the default budget. So there has to be some way
What's that posted
that we can
jobs?
generate a report. I haven't asked, well, I'm stuck.
Go ahead.
There has to
Not
be
in
a
agreement.
report that will clearly show which of those lines are unfilled, and the report that I have from last year, which I will send back to you, is just the year-to-date for the salaries, because that would show exactly which positions are unfilled, and I would still like to know which 12 professional positions we are not filling, and which 6 admin lines were not filled.
So which 12,
Professional lines are unfilled,
yep.
and 6
And
admin.
6 admin
And
are
there's
not
1 dean's
filled,
position on hold.
and
Yes.
1,
There's 1
open.
dean, there's 1 open position.
yep, that's still posted, or
I don't know if it's posted or not.
which 12 professional staff positions and which admin, okay? You got that, Jeff?
I have got
Kathy,
that.
write that down too. Can I let Jen go and then come back to you? Thank you.
I wish you had asked that question. I maybe could have had that for tonight's meeting.
I guess I thought I would get it, because if I had the salary line detailed report I was thinking, I would have been able to just pull it off of there, so that's why I didn't ask it in that way.
And you wouldn't have any, you would know that I'm pulling data from 2 years ago, to come up with the default, so. It's
Well, we were talking about the encumbrances, the question that kept coming into my mind that I didn't want to let go for this meeting that we talked about last meeting was the question about the consultant and that money, did it come from 17, 18, 18, 19? How did that?
Oh, we
end
answered
up?
that, but go ahead, answer it again. Came
17,
from
18.
17, 18, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. Can I just,
I'm gonna let Kristen have it.
I have a
Turn
very
in the-
basic budgeting question,
Sure.
just to I'm used to
15
doing
years of
the.
budgeting experience.
Yeah, just a little bit. With the town, we were always about 3 months behind when we looked at the actual or the expended. Is this 2017, is this 9 actual up-to-date final for 2017, 2018 for expended, or there's still?
We may have some general reclassifications for 17, 18. There may be some general.
But the numbers, the numbers are in, the reports are in, 'cause like I said, with the town, we'd be you know, we'd be sitting in October and thought we were okay, and then all of a sudden, boom, and the numbers all shifted again.
So
Or
in
is this
October,
a-
were you looking at the current year in October? When did the, on the municipal
they're-
side, was that at 12/31?
They're, yeah, January, but it's just the way that they would put the reports in, and it was always running about three months behind. So I'm just wondering if this is really
17, 18 is.
pretty much finalized.
Pretty much final,
I mean,
yeah.
that's it, they might, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And then on the other report that you see, the 2019 year-to-date LIP encumbrances, obviously that's, to date. That doesn't
date.
reflect our spend for the year at this point.
Back to Kim. All right, are you set, Kristen?
yeah, I just wanted to,
Yep. No, that's
I
good
didn't want to
because
look at the numbers and all of a sudden.
municipal budgeting is a little
A
different.
little
than-
different.
Kim?
Okay. So, can we go to the 1,200 line on this one that you
The
just
system
gave
generator
us?
report, yes.
And then I'm looking at the one that was passed out last time, because I didn't think that the numbers were gonna change, but they have changed.
They've changed.
So, which will bring me to a question, but I'll wait for that one.
No, it's fine.
So-
Go ahead.
Which page
Well,
you
We're
looking
looking
at?
at
Page
Which-
two.
I'm looking
one?
at page
This
two.
is-
Looking at page two here.
Two of the,
Of which, of the budget?
The one that
The
says
system
Timberlane
generated
Regional
report.
School District at the top.
They both do, but,
But that's all it says at the top. It's not a salary line, it's not.
okay.
The salary line details the other document.
So, if you look at the bottom of page two with the special ed roll-up is now, you're looking at, the voted budget was 9.8 million. You're now looking at a proposed final of 9.893 million. Last time, you were looking at a proposed final of 10.186 million. So, a couple of things. One, this was the line that I guess was grossly underfunded, which doesn't appear very much underfunded now. And my concern about moving money is that, we met 2 weeks ago, and now we have a number with a variance of about $300,000. I'm not in favor of moving any money around at this point. I was before we set the budget. And my other question is,
Before you set the
or
budget.
before the, remember we had the discussion about the Hampton case, and
Yes.
could you do that
Yeah.
before the MS 20, whatever, whatever I
three,
had,
it was
was sent
one of
forward?
those. Yeah,
So,
23.
I'm not in favor of moving money around, and my other question is, we have a policy that doesn't allow you to move it out of 7-digit object codes, right? So I can't move out of the 1,200 lines, right? I can only move within those lines. Can I move money from a 1,100 line, which seems, because we've reduced staff over by about $1 million, to a 1,200 line by policy? Can we do that?
I'm not certain that this is a policy issue. I don't think we have a policy that covers a vote, and I'm going to say it, a voted a default budget.
Right.
But it covers fund transfers.
I think that
The board has complete discretion to do as
There's a policy that covers fund transfers.
this is a little different.
Well, policy doesn't dictate RSAs. The RSAs would say that the board would have, it's a bottom line budget, and the RSAs say that we can move, as a board, move it around. to
It's sort of
where it's-
a one-time overlay, if you will, a one-time reallocation.
Fund.
Okay, so the board authorizes the superintendent or business administrator to transfer funds between object codes up to 25,000. So you can make any transfers within the 7-digit object code up to 25,000.
So she can, he can, yes?
Up to 25,000.
Uh-huh. Okay. What,
What policy is that?
where are you at? Because you have your,
Policy DBJ.
oh, DBJ. Let's find DBJ. D. Okay, transfer of appropriation, yes.
Okay, so that just, I'm just saying that typically you transfer within the object code, the 7-digit code.
7-digit code.
Up to 25,000.
25,000.
Okay, so I guess my point here is that in 2 weeks, we have a variance of 300,000 to 400,000. What is the compelling need to make all these fund transfers right now? Why not wait till we're further down in the year to make these transfers? I could see a compelling reason before we set the budget lines, but now that they're set, why would we do that?
We didn't set the budget lines. The voters adopted a budget
Well,
and
we set the budget lines, though, when we submitted, which I can find exactly which form it is,
DOE numbers,
the DOE,
or MS forms.
the MS form, the MS 22.
Yep.
We set the budget line when we, before that, we could have well, there was a question as to whether or not we could adjust based on what it, but we didn't. So I don't see, why are we trying to move money right now when we're not, I think as Kristen said, we're not at a point in a line where we really see the need to move it.
Well, I believe the nature of the default budget itself is a formula, and that you come up with that formula, you have needs that change. So some of the needs that change, and in some ways, how our budget is not aligned with what the needs are of the district, and
How will the budget committee be able to work with this if we don't have some adjustments made?
well, I think that
I never been on a budget committee, but I don't know how the budget committee's gonna do this without you moving some stuff so they can see what you're planning on spending.
I tend to agree, because I don't think that the default budget is ever intended to be, especially because courts have granted, RSA's grant complete overlay authority. It's a formula to come up with, and we'll call it a bottom line. It's not really a bottom line. It's a budget, and we have the ability to do that one-time transfer. But that one-time transfer supposes that the budget, that's given to DRA on that MS-22, as voted by the voters, that budget's in place, and you can do your one-time transfer, I'll call it a one-time transfer, from that, but that budget has to be in place in order to do that. I'll reference our tuitions on page 6 of 12 on the legal size document. When we budget and put the default budget together, it's not always down to function, object, and so on, so further location and schools and levels. So I'll reference about halfway down, and it's the line tuition, private and other middle school and high school. It's the 560, it's the 100, 1200, 564, 60, and then we have 16, 17, 33. So on our end, my budget owners typically request spending by entering a requisition into our enterprise system. They can only enter a requisition into our enterprise system when they have money in their budget to do so. So when we have expenses for middle school tuitions, right now, you can see what the voted amount was,
You can see what we spent.
which is 0. So the reason for this is it a big deal? Well, no, because really we're looking at our 1200 and then object code 564. So if you take all the 1200 564s together, you'll come out with a number that's not far off from where the spend would be. But the problem is that I need to make sure that when I'm paying a tuition for a high schooler, that I have the high school identified, or a middle schooler for the middle school to be identified. So in this case, our spend or encumbrances are at $709,000 technically on a line that we don't have funding for. Because the funding is in the next line. You'll see that we have 2 million, a little,
Yeah, over there.
2.1 in high school.
Want to move it up here.
We need to make these adjustments and spread it out a bit and provide, move some of that up to the middle school.
So ultimately,
Lee, go ahead.
it's gonna shake out to show the budget committee true balances on line items.
Well, true balances to where.
Balances and funded amounts.
It's something better than what and it's no offense to, it has nothing to do with the preparation of the default budget. It's just more, where is that at? Where does the school board identify the spending? Where does it look like that's at as an anchor point?
Correct, because in the past, on the budget committee, we've always struggled with where did the transfers take place, and we weren't necessarily seeing it.
Yeah.
You're essentially reconciling along to the account.
So in this case, if we have any further spending on that, or any spending at all on that middle school line, it has to get paid. I have to identify it as middle school. I'm not going to misidentify it or misclassify it. It's probably a special ed thing. I need to pay it, but it would be helpful to have that line properly funded to where it should be.
Jen?
I think, last time, what we were, I think what we were talking about was trying to understand where we were gonna be moving money from and to. So when you going right underneath those lines that you were just talking about, Jeff, the tuition and private, just to use this as an example, trying to understand. So residential cost high school, right? So it looks like voted amount was the 49,
Correct.
and the proposed adjustment is 52, because we're looking at a total spend of 101.
Potentially, yep.
So where's that 52 going to come from?
With this type of, and this is different than what we're used to, right? Because we're normally used to saying, well, we'll take from this account and this account, and we'll spread it to this account, or just two separate accounts. And this is more of a budget overlay. So when you look at the first page, and you'll see, for example, on the salaries teachers line, when I roll forward certain of our teachers and increases and that sort of thing, you'll see a line for the 2017-18 voted of 371, and you see an offset for 323. I have a better idea where we're at now for funding. So when you say, where does it come from? Well, we're eliminating some of these broad, lines where we don't need the funding, and we're reallocating where we do. So in that case, in the case of the 564, some of that's offsetting, but realistically, I think we're a little short in that area to begin with. So if you were to look and you were to take all the 564s or the 564s and the 569s, we're probably net contributing to those lines, right? We're not taking the 2 million and allocating it up to 564 and allocating it down to 569. It's a little bit of everything. We have a need for the funds here. You have an absolute right to reallocate and realign your budget as you best feel. So it's not a one-for-one.
Do we have something significant happen for the 300,000 for the special ed? Like, no, I'm not looking to get too specific, but
What 300,000, what are you talking about?
well, just that that observation you had made about that 10 million. One, two. I was just curious if there was a single significant event or a bunch of different things,
Well-
or how did we so quickly go from a difference of 300,000?
From 10
Oh,
to
okay.
9.6.
On the
And
1200
I'm
line.
not looking for too much detail or
No.
non-public or
No.
anything like that, but
I'm glad that you asked. And after we put the budget together last year, and of course, this budget was adopted from the previous year, this is probably more than you would ever want to know. But I'm going to direct your attention to 2900, which I believe is on the last page.
Are we still on this legal size?
Yes.
Last page.
In honor of our newest board member, everything will be legal. So if you see the 2900, the very last 2900 account, other employee benefits, you'll see an amount of 400,000.
Yep.
And to some degree, that's just an example, to some degree, when I had looked at this previously, we have benefits. We have amounts that get paid out for retirement incentives and different programs that we have when our employees leave. Some of those expenses are incurred when the employee is here as part of their employment, and some of it is what I would truly call a benefit. So you'll see funding in that line. We've never had that before. And when I was talking to our auditors about how we treat this in previous years, it didn't really matter if we captured that expense in their salary line or salary lines or the function object code in which they're paid, or if we captured it more broadly in a 2900 benefits line. What they were most concerned about is, where did you budget it? And so when I've been looking at these, and I will continue to do so, I will try and get the most up-to-date information always, but that was a consideration, that some of the funding can stay and move to the 2900 line because that's where we'll end up paying it out. Some of it should be in the salaries line. So that was one thing that I pulled out. You'll see that in the 1200 line, there's some adjustments on the staff lines as well. Salaries lines, probably on page 4.
But I think Jen's question was, why the difference in the 1,200 line of $300,000 in 2 weeks?
Well, that's
Yeah.
some of it, and we've also had some
Some of it's the benefits, you're saying?
some of its benefits, and we've had some favorable budgetary
Adjustments.
I'm not trying to
adjustments.
put you on the spot.
Is that a good way to put it? Some favorable budgetary adjustments. And that has gone the other way in the past, and that can vary, unfortunately.
I know, we've talked a lot about that
It's
is
gone down.
constantly a moving target, which I think was part of what Kim was saying is why,
And it's
being
big.
a little bit hesitant to, why are we in such a hurry to move, especially in a line like that we know can swing one way or the other throughout the year, depending on situations.
Well,
I guess.
it's sure. And here's the thing. So right now is our budget, horribly inaccurate relative to where our spend is or is going to be. It's not as good as it could be. And at some point to do, and we had discussed, are we going to do onesies, twosies? No, let's do a budget overlay. Let's do one adjustment. And our voted budget will always be our voted budget. Our budget as you all allocate, adjust, however you want to reference it, would be perhaps the adopted budget. So that adopted budget is that place in which we're going to start to look at and say, you know what, we have some needs in this area that have come up that we need to address, as we had last year. We had some significant budgetary concerns in the 1,200 area last year. But then we have that point at which to say, now we've done our overlay. If needs come up, now we can talk about whether it makes sense to move 100,000 here. Where's it going to come from? What's the impact? But it's really having that point to start, because right now, it's not, the budget is not intentionally not really supposed to be an exact budget meeting your precise spending needs. It's just the nature of the default. That's recognized. So if we have that place to start and launch that's relatively aligned with what our spending needs are going to be, at least we're there. At least we have that point at which to say, boom, it's done. That's our budget. That's what we're working off. Anytime we reference a need in the future, we'll be able to say, that's the adopted budget. We have a difference, a change. Here's what it is.
But the default budget doesn't have the granularity that these accounts have.
That's the whole thing.
And it's such a summation of a bunch of these accounts. So, for example, when you would have taken the amount that reflects the 1,200 number that we're talking about, and put the 2 million in the high school and doesn't have anything in the middle school, but yet now you're proposing a change to move some of it out of the high school into the middle school. That is a decision that was made, from the onset to put everything in the high school and nothing in the middle school. Adjusting it now it's irrelevant that it was all in the default budget. It was a conscious decision to put it there.
That's right, but I simply used what was given to me to populate these fields.
Yeah, and then you could sprinkle that on how it.
No, I had function object level. I believe the granularity was down to the level of these accounts that I used to import that into the system.
So you're saying there was an entry in there for the middle school that says 0 for tuition for private?
It wouldn't necessarily matter if we're looking at it at a higher level, right?
Correct, but that higher level never would have dictated that the middle school tuition for private was 0.
Okay.
So
So-
how did it get to be 0 then?
So I was given, this is the information that I received, because I had asked, we have a budget, I didn't put it together. I can't be guessing at what these numbers are. I need to know exactly function, object, and all that. And I believe, and I have to look back, but I believe that I've I received spreadsheets and I've adopted and populated the fields the way that they were provided.
Could I just interject? It also could be because at the middle school 2 years ago, they didn't have a need in this tuition line, because that was their budget then. But then someone could have moved in. And so, I mean, I think the point you're trying to make here, from what I'm trying to understand here, is that you're here asking us to really look at, or ask the board to look at this default budget as a proposed budget, or our voted budget that we're going to be working off of from now on.
That's right.
And instead of doing, 200 transfers, which might occur if we don't do this, you're suggesting that we do it all in one block and to have this be our budget going forward.
All 364 entries at once.
364
Whatever it
entries.
is, yeah.
1,300.
It'll be 363.
Okay, just
363
so
That's
I
right.
could
entries at
capture
once.
that.
Thank you.
Something else, Lee, then back to Kim.
So Jeff, looking at the legal size document, let's start from the back, page 12. Two questions. So the function object code, third from the bottom, 4,600, 450, building renovations district-wide. Looks like that's taking an adjustment, reducing it by 146,000. What's not getting done that's going to result in the decrease?
We didn't have anything necessarily lined up for this year relative to that 500
Okay.
in particular. We have projects that could be done. We have a number of things that we'll be needing to address. But I don't think that we had, and Sue would know, and I'll just use it as an example, but when our operating budget passes and certain CIP items, for example, are adopted as part of the CIP plan, and that budget passes, then I know that I can slate and say, hey, we have this, and this all lined up for this particular account code, because they're in the budget or they're in a CIP and they're recognized. But we didn't have really any projects earmarked for that 500. We just knew that there was a need to have money on our capital side. And again, we have the operating apportionment and the capital apportionment. And we knew that it was there, and quite frankly, did it matter that it was there? Well, it's there, and I can move that within other capital lines to come up with some reasonable all-around capital. So, for example, 4,200, I don't think had anything in it.
No.
Yep.
So I don't know off the top of my head, we did talk at facilities about some projects that, I mean, we can't just fund them all. We couldn't fund them all anyway. They weren't in the default, they weren't in a proposed budget either. So the ones that we could, I think, propose came to about 350,000 out of that 4,000, I call it the 4,000 line, 4,600 line.
It was a big cut to it, and I want to make
Right.
sure that there isn't critical needs that we're underfunding. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will.
Wouldn't really, yeah.
Critical, the buildings are safe, the buildings will be warm. Some things we'd hoped to do to move it along, yes, and we're hoping that this coming year, those things get moved along a little bit more. I have some windows that we've been just hanging on, you know, but, I mean, that adds up, it adds up quickly. The windows are quite expensive.
Oh, yeah. All right, last one, page 10, 2410-737, replacement equipment, same thing. We voted and budgeted 26,000, we're taking 25,000 out. What aren't we gonna replace?
So it's 27,
Where are you?
2410-737. Up from the bottom.
About a third of the way up.
Yeah, a third of the way
Replacement
up.
equipment, yeah.
Yeah,
No.
be a bunch of little things too.
Exactly.
Again, I just wanna make sure there's not some major equipment that we're deferring.
and you know, the way that the default is technically put together is you're looking at what you had in that year previously that was voted.
Right.
That money was there, and it rolls forward.
Right.
And if our principal's offices are okay, but we could use funding, you know, here, there, or wherever, now is the opportunity to be able to reallocate that. And I don't think, if we look at that line, it doesn't look like there was anything requested for the year.
No, good call.
So
Yep, that's
so we had
good.
done some projects previously, and those got rolled forward. And that's why the default's not a perfect, it's a way to come up with that number, but we don't need replacement equipment this year in the principal's office. We may need replacement equipment in technology. Or,
No, that $1 satisfies me.
yeah.
Kim,
And that's why all the columns, so that,
Yeah,
you know,
perfect.
okay, Lee? Kim, back to you.
To answer Lee's question, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when we put, if you look at the 4,600 line, that's building renovations.
yes.
By definition, there should be no money in that line if it's a default budget. There was a conscious decision by the board to put money into that line, not for any project, but because if we don't have money in that line, we don't have anything to do, we don't have anything to draw off in terms of EPV to apportion back to the towns. So to think that there was some project that we're not doing because we took money out of that line, that, I think that is a fallacy. So that's, I just want to clear that up, because there was no set projects in that line.
That's
That money was put there for apportionment purposes really only. And it was moved out of revenues lines that we anticipated would go down, which was federal funds and food service. So I just want to clear that up before I go
Yeah,
back
thank you,
to
Kim,
my.
for that. But, we have some money there for,
I'm not, I don't want to use double negative. I'm not going to say it wasn't a smart thing to do. Right?
No, I think we agreed that it was the right thing
be
to do
ashamed not
based
to
on.
have anything there, right?
Just in
Right,
case.
because then we would have run into a bind in
Well,
terms of.
that's why I asked, why are we reducing it?
Yeah. So, and not to, and Sean, to your point on, if you go up one more line up above sites, you'll see that we have some spend in that 4,200 line, a request of 49,000. Year to date, transactions with encumbrance is showing at 145. So that's one of our bigger encumbrances that did roll forward relating to the septic fields.
Oh, that's septic.
So you can see that nothing was voted in that line, and the proposed adjustment would be to remove some of the funding from some of the current budget in the buildings in the 4,600 to move it to the 4,200. So we can spread it out a bit and be covered in the event that we do have another sites-related issue. We have some funding there to cover it. But the 145 that you see there is largely from last year, and it's either been spent or is encumbered.
And that's why it distorts that line so much that it becomes useless.
And the good thing is that in that line, there's just one, that's just one project, right?
Right.
One thing that rolled forward, is quite a bit that rolled forward. But that's just demonstrating that for a majority of the accounts in here, the encumbrances aren't impacted. It's more important to see what we spent already, what we're obligated to. But I will tell you that is something that
Brian, then Sarah,
Is
then
there.
back to Kim.
So as Dr. Wilson mentioned about 10 minutes ago, really what you're in front of the board here tonight for is, what's in front of us here with these three nicely stapled sheets is a more accurate spread of what the voters gave us.
correct.
So you put together numbers, and now that went through the reorg, and now we're in September versus in March, you have more current data in terms of tuition, everything. Pretty much everything on this, you have
It's better.
99% more accurate data than you had back in March or April. So now you're just trying to get this to reflect that,
Correct.
which I would think would be better for the board as well as for the budget committee, I would think.
Never
And-
have.
And
And
for
the schools.
And the schools and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stakeholders
So
who
you-
are
you get
wanting
to see
needing to spend the money.
More accurate, where your money's being spent.
Right.
Where your
Never
money,
have.
where we're setting aside money and then tracking where it's being spent.
Right.
We have nothing, the bottom obviously changes, so you just, some big,
We're never going to have a perfect budget just due to timing, funding, and all that. But this is a better reflection, I think, of where our funding should be relative to where our needs are.
And the bottom line remains the same.
Correct.
It's
Although,
just shifting,
yeah.
although that's,
yes, I will, in full disclosure, the computer-generated report, the budget TRSD report, the system-generated report in the last page, because I had done a little bit with the system and trying to get all this to work, you'll see that the proposed change column on that very last page is off $1,250.
$1,250.
Yeah, those are in the 1100s. So those are captured actually in my changes here, but the voted and the proposed final do not line up. So before it's put out there, and it'll be some big social media bonanza telling you it's there, the change is there, and it's accounted for. So yes, the bottom line remains the same. We also have the issue and the concern about our capital apportionment relative to our capital-heavy towns who are contributing, our operating apportionment. And in doing this, I've pulled out and looked at those capital accounts and made transfers only within those capital accounts. So our capital transfers, net zero. So the amount of money that we're requesting from the towns to be apportioned to capital, even under our revised budget, will be budgeted for capital.
Sarah, oh, sorry, Brian, you said.
No, I know, just.
Okay, Sarah, then back to Kim.
So on page 4 of the big
The legal.
document on legal, there are two lines that kind of stand out to me in the 2018-2019 voted amount line. It's in the 1100, 733. there's a 64,411 that's a negative, and then you bump it, you add that to correct it.
So bring it
and
to
then there's
zero.
a 20,285. So I'm looking across, there wasn't any money expended or requested or anything. So how did we vote on a negative line item? It just seems weird that it was put in the budget that is a negative number.
As a negative number, and for our budgeting purposes, that will happen at a very high level, and it's typically just to offset some other anticipated either function or object code cuts. So if we had budgeted 2 years ago, a total in the 1100,733 account category and amount, then that may have been a reduction of that. And I'm not certain, but if we added up all of the positive, all the debits in that account, what it would come to. That 64,000 is one easy way to net zero the entire account,
Oh,
the entire function object
the
code.
entire function object.
Yep. So,
And you've done that
So-
several times here, right?
Yeah.
so it's a lot easier to look at the function object code at a high level and say, we have perhaps, and I'm not sure if these add up precisely, I didn't look, but if we have 64,000 in that, it's new equipment, right? New equipment is not something that you're rolling forward as part of a default budget.
Right.
You just enter a credit, and that would negate the whole function object line.
You do the same with the replace equipment farther down on the page as well.
Right, you mentioned that, yeah.
Okay. It was just two lines that stuck out because they were negatives.
Reasonably so.
You know.
Yeah, and you wouldn't necessarily notice, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't see, wouldn't materialize on function object level report like this.
Okay.
All you'd know is I have a bottom line that I like in that function object code. How you get to it, well, is it easier to go in and create a negative? So that's from the previous, that could have been a roll forward from the previous budget that was just negated in one fell swoop.
Kim, back to you.
So, but I thought you said that those lines were taken from the spreadsheet that you were obtained from me.
Yeah.
That I had negative numbers in those lines? I didn't know we were going to this level, so I don't have that level of spreadsheet with me, but I don't recall negative numbers in those.
Yeah,
I mean, I
it's-
could see why your system would do it, but I didn't have a system that would do it, so I will look, because
I'll take a
I'm a
look.
little perplexed by that.
Well, I don't think it's a, I don't know that it's a, I don't want to say he said, she said, or anything like that. It looks odd when we're looking at it this level of detail, but it does what it's supposed to do. If it's to negate out that expenditure, right? If we have new equipment that we want to eliminate,
Oh, I get it from your accounting software, but I'm sure my software doesn't have that capability. That's all I'm saying. So,
yeah.
I guess my other concern here, and again, going back to moving money around, 2 weeks ago, had we kind of not said, hey, let's wait a second so we can look at this, we would have voted this, okay? Now, 2 weeks later, I'm looking at another budget with huge differences from what I just looked at 2 weeks ago. I mean, for instance, the 1,100, 1,200 line, the delta between 2 weeks ago and now is 345,000. The 1,100, 610 line, the delta is over 400,000. I'm just concerned about moving money around and setting this when in 2 weeks we had huge changes. What are we
Well-
gonna see in 2 more weeks? I guess that's what happened in 2 weeks to cause,
If you take a vote and you accept this as, or you overlay this as the budget, that's our budget.
Yeah, but if we did that 2 weeks ago, we
That
would
would've
have
been-
been here with
we would have
another,
been here again in 2 weeks
with
changing it
probably
again.
750, just of the
Well,
stuff.
that's
that you-
just that, I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Accounting is binary. However, accounting's binary, right? That's kind of the way it works, but when we have expenses that are budgeted, typically the expenses will follow the budget. And perfect example in the situation of employee benefits, moving it down, it's probably more proper there. Talked a little bit about the fact that it would be good practice to do that. I have an opportunity to do that. So as I'm going through the budget, if there's an opportunity to adjust or fix or whatever it may be, it is what it is. If we voted that I'd pay employee benefits out of the salary line like we've been doing. It's not the best accounting, but I can catch up with that in the next budget cycle. But, if I have the opportunity to take and look and tweak, I will continue to make sure that it most accurately reflects the needs of the district. Once it's voted, it's voted, it's stuck, it's done, that's it. That's our adopted budget, and we are good. And then we can look and talk about, we need any further changes, something's come up, we have a need in special ed, we have a need in technology, we have a need in grounds. That's why I would like to freeze the budget, because we'll continue to look and, unless you say, hey, you know what, let's leave the budget the way that it is, unless I have any other recommendations, I will continue to do so. Because if I find out that we have a need for $500,000 or $200,000 to $300,000, $400,000, whatever it is, for special ed that's come up in that time, I'm absolutely going to bring that to this board. Say, look, in the time that we met, this is what's come up. We haven't set a budget. I want that to be part of the consideration.
But I think it's like part of Jen's part that she brought up is that it's the dynamic of that particular one of special ed. If we decide to move money into there, and then all of a sudden, I mean, it's a fluid situation. So it could also then go down, and now we're going to take the money back on out to move it somewhere else. So this bucket of funds is hopping around throughout the year. I mean, you don't want to do that either.
I'd like to have, what I've
Starting
proposed is
place.
not a set budget. What I'd like to do is
Starting
have
place.
you set the budget so that we have that pause, and we have some measuring tool to say, stop, this is it, and if we have any variances, let's talk, let's chat, let's figure out why and what's going on. Until then, I will continue to try and get this closer to fine, and I think that was the point. If we kept the budget open, well, I mean, we can set the budget in May. I'll have a pretty good idea where the spend is, and we can line the budget right up with spend. But it's limiting some of my departments, it's limiting spend, and quite frankly, I don't think that it's the best reflection of how we can get this budget season kicked off. I'd like to have this board vote and adopt a budget that we can look at that's a little bit more proximate to what our needs are in order to
Right.
So Jeff,
launch that next
Okay.
budget season.
really what you're looking for, I want to make sure want to make a motion here. There's three things here. So really, the Bible you want to now create is the one that says Timberlane Regional School District salary line detail. Is that the one?
Nope.
Or do you want to do the one that says just the overall Timberlane Regional School District, that's pages 1 through 17?
Yes, to get this to look like this, I make these adjustments.
Okay, all right. So,
These,
okay, so I'll make a motion that we adjust the budget in accordance with the documentation provided to the board tonight, entitled Timberlane Regional School District Budget, pages 1 through 17 as presented.
Second.
so motion by Brian, second by Sarah. Discussion? And I think this has been great discussion, really rich, but we've been on this almost 49 minutes. So just giving you some time frame here. So Kim, I saw your hand first. Some discussion?
I'm just going to tell you why I'm going to vote against it.
Okay.
I know we've been on it 49 minutes, but this is a 17-page document, and we're moving tremendous amounts of money around, and I have not had time to study it. So, and it's what I have figured out, though, is it's significantly different than the one that I just got 2 weeks ago. So I might be in favor of it if I have 2 weeks to look at it, but I'm not going to be in favor now just because I don't have the time to take a look at it.
Okay. Somebody else, other comments? Yes,
What
sure.
I like to do is to actually see that these documents are attached to our minutes so that people can reflect and know exactly what this board is
You want-
seeing as it transfers.
You want these
These,
two sets?
these series of documents to be attached
17 and the big one,
Yep.
okay, attached to the minutes?
so that we,
So
so
you
that people
speak
can
to
understand
motion.
what we're looking at. Because if it's just the minutes, it's just something was presented to us and we voted on it and trying to figure out what documents
Will these
that
be
is later
online?
on.
Yeah, they'll be online, and the minutes have a direct link to all the agenda packet information that was submitted to the board at every single meeting. So every set of minutes that are out there, you can click on the link at the top of it, because it's electronic, and it takes you automatically to the school board agenda packet folder, so the public can see what's in your packet.
Public can see what's in the
This
packet.
wasn't in our packets, though.
Yeah.
It'll get-
It still gets, after the meeting, additional things are added, I scan them in and I put them as part of the package.
Okay, so you're saying,
She'll make, he'll,
Yes.
so
she'll make
all
sure
three of
these
these
are-
documents then will be part of that agenda packet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
He was, so,
Yeah.
let's go back to the motion,
Yeah.
speak to the motion here. Good point, Sean, we'll make sure these get, so people can look at this detail.
And I guess I want to further explain, I'm trying to push this forward because I believe, as you're starting the budget season, I believe this document is a lot more relevant and accurate for everybody. So if there was only a few items that we could just overexpend, then I would be in favor of that. But there seems to be quite a few items legitimately that more accurately present our $71.8 million.
Right, and we asked for that, so,
Yeah,
you know,
so
I
that's-
asked for this
that's
because we
what
could
I'm
see,
basing on.
this is a lot of detail that he's done, so we could accurately see this, put this out to our community as well. Jen, something else to the motion?
I just wanted, before I vote on it, to ask Brian, because he's our liaison for BudCom, is this helpful for the budget committee and what they've been asking for?
Absolutely.
Lee's shaking his head, so is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's
That's
what I just
you are
wanted
too,
to
Kristen, from your
piggyback on what
experiences.
Brian said too, is having budget experience, knowing that they're starting up, they want to have a number that they can work with, not something that's going to shift around over and over. And I haven't seen the document, Kim, that you've seen 2 weeks ago, so I might have a lot of the same questions, but seeing this and knowing that the bottom line is ultimately staying, oh yeah, you do need glasses for that, don't you? Knowing that the bottom line is staying there and you're shifting, and, you know, we have to have the trust and faith in you and the department heads and whatnot to come forward and say, this is really the adjustments that we need. So knowing that that will help the budget committee, and giving them that base to work from, and the numbers may change some more, or we may see different numbers down the road, but at least it's a baseline for them to start their process, because without that, it's a nightmare, and they're not going to be able to get that footing, so that's why I'm
And the
inclined to vote
stakeholders,
in
and the
favor.
people trying to prepare budgets,
Yeah,
and the
it's-
schools trying to get their
I mean,
things.
and ultimately, it might not be perfect, and I get that, and I respect him that you want to see, because you have all this, it's a lot of information. But that would be the reason why I'd be inclined to go, is just to help the budget committee to start their process
Right.
moving forward.
You need a starting place.
Yeah.
So I will
Other-
remind you that we have the 1,250 on that last schedule, so that
Yep.
it will be the bottom line. These are the changes.
Okay.
In your motion, why don't you say what the bottom line is?
Brian, why don't you go
Just to
back
be
and put
clear?
in your motion that the bottom line is 70?
Well,
Don't choke, Brian.
it has to, it better match the warrant. There's no.
I didn't want to
Has to.
Yeah, there's no little
It's
pot
gonna
of gold
vote, it's
there.
gonna match the,
You know, the 71,759,415.34.
Thank you.
That should be.
34 cents, yes.
Yeah.
71 million.
Okay. Unless there's new information.
match the
Voted
warrant.
amount, not the requested
But-
amount. You're looking at the
Voted
requested amount. You want it's a 72,120, isn't
Oh,
it?
okay, yes.
72.
72,126,06,62, which
Yes,
is the,
Yes, that's why I want to be clear.
Yes.
that's what I said.
voted amount.
Well, you voted on the whole sheet, so that's,
Yeah.
unless it was some other
With the
sheets. That's
$1,250
why I did that.
thingy.
Yep, that
Yep.
1,250 adjustment.
Yeah.
That's what you
Unless
want.
there's new information, people have made their points, I think. I'm gonna end discussion and call for a vote. Mrs. Belger, can you read the motion back one more time, please?
Mr. Boyle motioned to adjust the budget in accordance with the documents provided to the board this evening. That will be the budget, pages 1 through 17, reflecting a bottom line of $17,120,606. That was seconded by Mrs. Mockamer.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1, no abstentions, so the motion passes. Thank you for this work. Now, can we go back to Kim's request about the salaries? Kim, you want more detail? Can you,
62 cents.
on this, can you directly speak to Jeff and let him know exactly? I thought he gave you what you wanted. I passed your email exactly along
Thank you.
to him.
I will send you the
Yes.
PDF file that I had for
That's
last
fine.
year's salary line details so that you can maybe
as a
produce
basis.
the same one.
I know the one probably to which you're referring, and I think the issue is I don't know how relevant that data is gonna be, I just don't have that. But I will take that, and I'll get,
Thank
I'll
you,
see what the
Jeff.
request is. It may not be in the same form, I'll see what I can do. So-
Well, I guess if you can't do that, then I guess what I would then want to know are where on these salary line details are those 14 positions taken
Okay,
from?
so we'll get those two questions answered. That will certainly help. You got those written down. And any more detail that you could give relative to what Kim was requesting, you know, I want to make sure her question gets answered
Thank you.
if we can.
And can I just add ask one more question or comment? When I look at the enrollment numbers, because I know we got those last time, and I compared them to April of 2018, and Dr. Wilson, you probably know this number, or maybe Christy does. We're down in the district by about 100 students this year from last? Is that correct?
I don't know the exact numbers, but we usually go by the October 1 counts. The October 1 count, enrollment counts, are the ones that we base all our formulas on. So we do take preliminary data, you know, starting the first day of school.
Okay.
But the October 1 counts are the ones that we all pay attention to for reporting to the department.
Will we have access to those numbers on the 4th?
Yes.
No, it's due the 15th.
Oh, it's due the 15th.
It'll probably be the week of the 15th.
So the next meeting.
18th.
So the 18th meeting, we should have a number and then be able to say whether we're,
Does the department do work on those? Department of Ed do work on those, or is those our numbers? Ours.
yeah, so ours, we'd be able to have that number and discuss that. So we'll plan on that, Mrs. Belcher, if you can, making sure we can get those
And then
numbers.
we'll have a much more accurate answer.
So you're looking for October 1 numbers at the.
October 15th numbers at the 18th
The
meeting.
October 1 numbers at the October
Yeah,
15th
at the
meeting.
October
Right,
15th.
at the 18th meeting, right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Kim? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are moving on to school board goals.
Sue?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Henderson's here. I know he's gonna be part of the non-public at the end. But he's been waiting a while, and I think the goals and the policies might take us a little bit of time. Can we bump him up? Is anyone opposed to that? Does that make sense? No?
To do the non-public now? It has to be done in non-public.
I'd
I
rather you,
appreciate it, Lee. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
yeah. I mean, if you wanna hang out till 10:10:30, yeah.
Well, we could get moving.
Yeah, I think we should.
All right, let's see if we can get the goals done, unless I hear you speaking to Lee's suggestion. If not, let's go on to school board goals. So this is our draft. Kim kindly suggested a couple things. We added those in. I hope these went out to you. I frankly was kind of busy this week, and I didn't even open the agenda pack, so this is the first time I've seen it all in red and black. So I hope you've had a chance to look these over and maybe have some questions. So I'm going to open it up for some questions to begin with, or comments, concerns about anything, amendments, or before we vote. We're going to vote each one separately, so I'd like to move it along if we can. Sarah, did you have something? You had said something earlier.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was just, under planning, number 5, the action item, the board will request verification of student-teacher ratio. I just wanted to better understand the intent of the action item. If it's to identify areas of opportunity where we can make recommendations and suggestions to CNA for curriculum improvements, or if it's to look at enrollment numbers in specific classrooms and look to adjust and maybe like add or create a enrollment requirement for a class. I just wasn't sure what that really was speaking to, so it wasn't something that I proposed, so I was just wanted to better understand the intent.
This was Kim that you suggested this action item. Do you want to speak to that, Kim?
Sure, there are two different things. One, student-to-teacher ratio. It's a huge budget driver when you're looking at the budget. And this is predominantly at the high school because it's pretty much fixed at the elementary school and almost at the middle school. So that would be, based on all your classes, what's your student-to-teacher ratio? And so, yes, it could play into whether or not a course is offered if it has under 10 students, because, if you're looking in higher ed, if you're a public institution, your student-to-teacher ratio might be 50-1, whereas a private institution might be 10-1. So I'm not saying that we're anywhere within that realm, but it's a driver. So you have to look at your course offerings in context with your student-to-teacher ratio. Teaching load is a little bit different. If I teach 5 classes with 5 students in them each, that's my teaching load is 25 students. Whereas we may have teachers that teach 5 classes with 25 students in them, that's 125 students that teacher is responsible for. So those are 2 separate things, and it's good to take a look at those, because it will then have you, cause you to look at your curriculum and your course offerings to see what you should be offering and maybe what you shouldn't be offering.
Just kind of follow up on
Go
that,
ahead.
I guess. I personally am not in favor of that, because I feel that we have some senior teachers that are teaching specific classes that typically have a lower enrollment, that those classes have value for those students. And the guidance department does a very good job in reviewing the history of enrollment for classes over year. And my own kids weren't able to take classes because guidance identified lower enrollment and dwindling population, so they discontinued those courses. So I just don't feel that that's in the purview of the board. So I would not vote for that action item.
Other comments about any of the, you'll notice we've got academics, a section called academics, a section called planning, culture and community, and financial, which really matches pretty nicely with the strategic plan. And, we're supporting a lot of the things that are happening at the strategic plan teams with our engaged support. So, go ahead, Kim. Question?
I just want to respond to Sarah's
Okay,
comment.
sure.
That is certainly within the purview of the board. If you look at what the responsibilities of the board is, and it has to go to financial, and it has to go to education, that is certainly within the board's purview, and it's certainly, if you look at other school board goals, you'll see it in there very, very frequently.
That's fine. It's just not something that I agree with. I feel that we have professionals, we have a curriculum and assessment committee, we have guidance counselors who really go over they review the course of study offerings. They ensure that we are offering courses that are relevant to our students, that meet the needs of all of our students, and some of those do have lower enrollments, but that doesn't mean that they should be, that a class size requirement should be in place, because then it may take away a class that a student who currently is now a sophomore and is planning on taking it as a senior, suddenly, in order to get into a particular program in school, suddenly finds that program no longer available because you're supposed to have 10 people enrolled and only 8 enrolled. And I just feel that it would have a waterfall effect that would be detrimental to our students, and it's our responsibility to ensure that we are providing the best education possible. So I just wanted to better understand the intent. I understand it now, and I don't agree.
Other things you want to talk about before we start voting? I'm sorry. Hi, Nick.
Hi, yeah, just wanted to chime in. I agree with you in that. I think that's important to recognize. We have classes like advanced placement for a reason. It's not for everyone. To put in a class requirement size and generalize it into every single class, it just doesn't make sense. So just don't have that for consideration. We have higher placement classes that would have less students for a reason. So
And the other end as well.
right, exactly, right.
There's a
Exactly.
reason sometimes where right.
So it can't be all generalized.
Thank you, Nick, for that comment. Somebody else, was it Jen, did you have your hand up? Then I'll come back to Brian.
I did. I thought when we, I'm just trying to look back on some of the notes. When we had some of those workshops,
Work sessions, yeah?
yeah. Specifically, I'm looking at a planning number 6. The board will commit to less use of social media and streamline the use of social media for district announcements by all schools in the district.
They tried to generalize it. I had all kinds of notes there. Did you want to amend that?
I'm not really sure what I want to amend it to, and I wasn't sure why that's on planning and not culture community.
Oh, maybe I don't know why I got over there. Maybe I didn't correct it. We can bring it over
And
to culture
and I
and community.
can't find my notes, and maybe if somebody
It can go over to culture community, that's
who was
fine.
there can refresh.
You want to put it over there? We'll just add it. We'll put it as,
I thought we had something about communication. I don't know that
I didn't
social
bring
media
mine.
was the right word.
oh,
More media in general.
okay, how about, all right, so you want to move it over to the culture and community. I'm fine about that. Are we okay about that? I thought it fit in planning, but it doesn't make any difference. You can put it over there and make it number 3 under culture and community. And I know we had quite a bit of discussion there, and my notes were all over the place as well, and I thought I captured it by saying this, but if you want to amend it or change it to something different, it says commit to use of less social media and streamline the use of our social media for district announcements. Less use of media? I don't know if we want to say that. We like to put some things in the newspaper. I'm not necessarily in favor of that one, but I put it in because we had quite a long discussion over it.
We did. We had a long discussion over it. Some of the discussion was around the news media, and some of the discussion was around our district social media websites and the oversight of that, the open comment section of that. I just don't feel like everything we talked about is really
Well,
captured there. I'm
yeah.
not sure how to.
I was trying to capsulate it. I thought I had, so, how could we change that so it better captures that? Any ideas?
I personally think it's a goal. I think you've got it.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? It's a goal.
I understand what Jen is saying, and I kind of thought what you're saying was kind of in there, but maybe it isn't.
I read that. Commit to less use of social media. Period.
Bam.
It's a goal.
So the newspaper, social media?
Well, you're not gonna go into a 20-page, I mean, this, and this.
But that's
It's a goal.
That's a pretty big.
It's a goal, though.
Brush.
I didn't hear, I guess I never heard newspaper as much as I heard the social media piece, the
Yeah,
tweeting, that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's fine.
it's a goal.
That's all, yeah. Anything else?
Can I make
Yes.
a comment?
Go ahead.
Yes, but
Because I've had a lot of experience working with boards and goals. One of the observations, and I know I haven't been privy to a lot of this, but one of the observations I see is, right now you have 14 goals. That's a lot. And I think that there are some goals in here that are reflective in the strategic plan, which you just approved and adopted. So I think there's some things in here that are redundant
Right.
to what we're already doing with the strategic plan that could possibly come out and just
Come out
let
of
us,
here?
let us work on the strategic
All
plan.
right, so which
because-
ones do you think could come out? That'd be great.
That'd be
We'd-
great.
We'd be happy for less, as long as they were covered someplace else.
Well, some of the action items in red here, I think that's already established in the strategic plan, the long-term facilities steering committee, the facilities master plan. I don't think you need something as narrow and specific as some of these action plans, these action items, rather. That's something that you can, as a board, you can direct us to do along the way, if that's what you need or want. But I think your goals, if you look at these, that's 14 goals. Guess who's gonna be working on all those, right? Because your goals become the school goals and the district and the superintendents, and we all, work towards them. If there's a way for you to streamline it so we understand it a little bit, some of these I have some questions about, but
All right, so let's go into the planning section. Kim, you had suggested in the action plan, the board will request the establishment of the long-term facilities. I mean, we weren't really sure when we were gonna get this, strategic plan ready and going. Now we voted in, we put in October 15th, but we were hoping to kind of get you going there. So if we're getting you going, we could take it out, you're saying?
I would say take out all three.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
All
we started
three?
this
The
summer.
strategic
with
plan.
Developing these goals.
I know.
And you didn't have it
the
at the
strategic
time.
plan was
That's what I
extremely
know.
on the back burner
So
at
number
that
2 can
point.
go away altogether.
So,
Wait, hang on.
The
So,
red
You're
number
right.
two.
yeah,
number
so
2
two can go
yeah.
away because we got it done.
Yep.
But remember, we were working in July, you're right.
you're gonna take away all the stuff that we got done, that we can say that we got done.
Well, that's what I'm saying, check.
Then everything that's gonna come out here tonight, we haven't done
We
yet.
fulfilled our goals. Maybe we should
already
leave
did
them
it.
on and check them off.
No mulligans here.
I would say 3 goes.
3, the board will support preliminary studies to better understand, blah, 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 blah.
That's
That's part of the strategic plan.
I
don't-
disagree, because it sets specific action dates, and I think that's important.
We put dates in there because we wanted to have target dates that we would have this information, and some of those dates, you know, the long-term facilities steering committee, no later than October 15th. That date, I think, was specifically picked to be able to look forward to the budgeting season and warrant articles and.
Right.
But isn't that met though,
captain
by
is-
adopting the strategic plan? They're gonna go out now.
Yeah, and now they're gonna form the team.
Right, and it might take us more than a couple of weeks to do that, is what I'm saying. October 15th, you might have done it this summer, but
You haven't been
October
doing it
15th
since
is
the
like 3 weeks away.
You don't have that.
I
You
know,
don't have that
but
right now.
we are gonna be looking, remember, we just said we're not gonna look at the strategic plan subcommittees for 6 months. We're
Till
gonna
March.
look at these, and this is why I think it's important to have it in something that's in front of us.
So if we left, let's leave 3 in, and
We
let's
need a
leave,
date.
huh?
The first, receive CIP report and strategic plan by, it says insert date here.
All right, so, right, because I didn't know it, so the CIP is a different date than the strategic plan overview. So I was thinking of putting CIP report by November.
And we can cross out the and, because we already have the strategic plan.
So receive the CIP report by November 1.
Right.
But wouldn't you put review strategic plan?
And review strategic plan
October date?
by second meeting in
October.
March.
Oh.
No, because I thought we were gonna
September,
know.
March, right,
Just say
March.
twice a year.
By-
Make it, you know, make it so that
Yeah.
we've
And
already
then-
established
Makes
it.
sense.
So, and review strategic plan implementation twice a year. Yes?
Mhm, That makes sense.
That long-term facility steering committee, again, that's 3 weeks. Development of the master plan, March 2019. I don't know what our timeline was or what we were looking at. We might be able to do something like that, but
Kim, I changed it to say October 15th because I already knew the facilities people had started to talk. And I had that privy that Kim didn't know, and I thought we could do that by the 15th, but we don't meet again till November 1st, the facilities committee. So Tom's got to be doing that over here and then come to the facilities committee and report it. So is November 1st a better?
Probably.
15th?
That's
better.
fine, November 15th. I'm just, what we're trying to do here with this
Yeah.
facilities steering committee and the facilities master plan is work backwards from next year's budget cycle, next year's CIP. If you don't have this master plan done by March, remember, Sue,
Right,
the
I'm with you.
CIP requests need to be in by April, so
Right.
that's why that's.
Or we got to adjust it all over, yeah.
Well, then it throws the CIP plan out, so that's
Makes
a
it much harder. So, I think 2019, you could say April,
yeah, I think we can do that.
April 1st. And you
For
know it's gonna be the first
facilities
meeting in
plan?
April or whatever. Is that fine? Does that work, April?
I think we're looking at the October 15th date. What was that going to be?
October 15th becomes
November
November.
Yeah.
just because the facilities committee won't have met. They only meet quarterly.
Okay.
And then the facilities master plan by April of 2019.
And just a formality, that the action plan that you were talking about, teacher ratio and teacher teaching loads, I don't see how that connects with number 5. Number 5 is about your training.
Yeah, I don't know how, that got stuck in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Where do you think that should be?
Well, can I comment on that too? Well, you guys.
Absolutely.
In fact, I sat right here a year ago and on this topic, and I said, if somebody walks through that door and wants just one person wants a class that Timberlane doesn't offer, I don't think we should offer it. If there's one person who wants to take it, I don't have a magic number, but and I know that it's not that easy for someone to walk in, but. And I'm hearing the points of everybody, but I just think when I'm reading what Kim drafted there, that the board will request it's a goal, and you're forcing the system to look at something. So if there's one person, 2 or 3 people, give it a real solid look, because again, the odds of that happening is slim to none. But I think this is Timberlane Public School.
My point is it's already getting looked at. It's getting looked at by guidance, it's getting looked at by the curriculum assessment, it's getting looked at by the professionals, and they're already making those adjustments as needed in real time.
So it should
So-
be easy to justify
Yeah.
by seeing the data.
Well, I think it's verification that,
Yeah,
you
that's-
know, that we're,
that's all.
when they're doing the course booklet for the next year, they've already gotten feedback for what kids want. We're talking high school now, what the kids want to take, and they're balancing that. Wants, needs, space, teachers, there's a lot, AP classes.
Isn't there already an internal process
There
at
is,
Timberlane?
yeah.
If you have less than 10, you have to go through a series of approvals to offer something? Isn't there already something
I
for
believe they do that.
the teachers? Don't they already have some kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in there, every year they look at their program of studies and
Program of
make
studies
some,
book,
make some adjustments.
Go ahead, Jen.
This isn't, this action item, the action is to look at it and understand it. It's not to tell the administration what to offer, what not to offer. But if we as a board, and I spoke to this very early on when we talked about, the staffing structure and changes, if we as a board are going to be supporting the academics, supporting a program of studies, supporting the course offerings, then I think it's valuable information for us to have so that we can understand it. Don't just come and ask us to, rubber stamp something and give our support without showing us how we got there so that we can understand it.
My concern is that it presents the possibility of it being a slippery slope where it goes from we're presented with this information to then cherry picking particular classes that have a low enrollment and just instructing the administration to instruct guidance to no longer include it in the course of studies. It just seems like a slippery slope. When we've had changes, then they've come and presented, and they've given us the history. They've given us the data on why these adjustments are being made at the time of the request. They're not going to just say we want to take away this course, willy-nilly without actually presenting us the data at the time. Mike, I understand wanting to the request of the board to understand the history, but I just feel that it's a slippery slope, and it could very easily lead to an instruction where classes are then being removed from the course of study without understanding the full impact to the students that expect to be able to have access to a class in order to then get into a program of study in college. It just concerns me.
So then your solution is to avoid the problem and never
No,
look
it's
into it?
not to
Easy,
avoid
easy.
it.
Wait a
It's,
minute.
But if you're never going to look at it, we're basically, if we don't adopt something like this, or to say that we're going to look at it, it's just status quo, and we're never going to talk about it again.
I don't agree with that piece that we would never talk about it again, because I've been privy to those discussions. German is a perfect example. They decided to do away with German. It was less asked for. The classes were smaller and smaller and smaller, so that we're down to just a couple of kids that are being allowed to finish up, and we're not going to offer German anymore. We made that decision. The experts made that presentation. And we did have data, and we did understand why. And we're offering Latin, and maybe it's Arabic next, we don't know, but there'll be other requests to add and build. Same thing with the engineering program. That started very small, and it was, and it's built and built and built and built. So I don't think we'd never look at that information again
isn't-
from our experts.
It's been presented. We've seen it. It just concerns me. I just feel like it opens up the door to just suddenly remove programs that,
I don't think we should be afraid to have a discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm happy about the discussion. I want the experts that are doing the
Feels like
curriculum plan.
we're not gonna have the debate, so if we don't get any kind of data to even look at, we're never gonna have a conversation to be a debate. I would like to, whatever class we have, and we're gonna talk about it, if it ever comes up as a question of, are we gonna keep it or not, let's have the discussion here in open forum. That's what I want.
With the experts who are giving us their expert advice as an educator about the programs, right? Yes?
at the time,
At the time, but supporting it and looking at the data.
this is an overall, now look at everything. This is very, very broad. It's not a
Do we have
specific.
4 courses with 2 people in them, or do we have,
And so then what
15
happens if we
courses
do?
with 6 people in it?
I know, but
These are the kind of data that we need to look at.
What I think Sarah's looking, you might see that and say, you don't know what that art class is and who that art class is being taught to. Whether it's what Nick was speaking towards or what I spoke to, low-level kids, hands-on programming, opportunities for AP, opportunities for college art programming, et cetera.
But with something with that data
To
could
take it
could force
one
us
at a time.
to look at something and saying, hey, maybe we want to bring that department or that class or have some kind of a discussion with the experts on that so that we could discuss it. It's like we're never going to get there if we never look at something.
Oh, well, I think they'll present that information as they go along. Kim, you've been very patient, thank you.
The idea that students don't get into college because a course is not offered at their high school is completely false. Completely false. Colleges, speaking as somebody who just had a daughter accepted to a college, and speaking as somebody who's in college, colleges look at what your courses are being offered, and they see that you're taking a rigorous program of study. They do not expect you, if you're out in the middle of Washington, to have 20 AP classes. So that, I just want to dissuade people of that fact, okay? This belongs under financial. It
Okay.
doesn't belong under planning.
Okay.
Because it does speak to financial.
So you
And
want to put it under financial, that's
where it
fine.
should- That's where it should go.
Okay,
Because
sorry,
it's a-
just got mistyped, that's me, that's on me, I just,
So that was the question that was asked.
Nick,
so.
you asked, and then I'm gonna go back to
Yeah,
John.
I just think that to not move this topic into other issues. I think that in the end, what needs to be said is that not every class can be looked at as the same thing. It's not about what AP classes are offered or what low-level classes are offered. It's more so about we have to look at. There's nothing wrong with having data presented in front of the school board. It's just that when you receive the data, it's most important to look at the specifics of the class, and when you're deciding whether or not it should be, had, you just need to look at the specifics on who's taking it, is it necessary? As long as those, as long as that's fulfilled, because that's a responsibility, then there's nothing wrong with receiving the data. Again, I agree with Mr. O'Neill in that sense, that there's nothing wrong with seeing the data. But when we have that discussion, it just needs to be said that every class is different, and you have to consider all the facts.
Right.
They are. I agree with that.
Right.
We're going to have we would have a debate of that particular topic
If it even happens.
amongst everybody here.
Right.
That would be the case.
All right,
I-
Jen, something, we're gonna move,
Yeah,
I
I just
agree,
want
we'll move it over there
this
to
is a good,
financial.
it's a good point that, all right. Wherever that is. There was a date in there that triggered my memory of why we're talking about this, and I can't recall if it's a policy or if it's an RSA, but something to do with the budgeting process and having, staff numbers, help me out, Lee. Having staff, having salary or staffing information to budget committee by January. Why are you all looking at me like I'm crazy?
You
I'm
think it's
trying
a
to see what you're talking
policy?
about.
Yeah.
Where are you getting at? Where are you
Well,
going
no,
with
what,
this?
what I think Jen's getting at is the reason that we set a date of December 1 is because if you start to look at this and you see that there needs to be adjustments in terms of the inventory staffings or the organizational structure, then that needs to be done early so that it can go to the budget committee. That I think was the reason for that.
Yeah,
But-
December
Yeah, and there was
1st.
something, but there was something else about, yeah, there's a policy in there about when information will be to the budget committee about,
We can always amend
Staffing.
I
these,
think
you know.
there is a policy
Yes.
about
Good, you're
when
on policy
information
committee.
needs
You
to
can
be.
check that out.
I don't know what policy that is, though.
I think the goal, you said what the goal is. It's not about student ratios. The goal is that you want the board to better understand
There
the
you go.
enrollment and student staffing and the needs of the district. I mean, that's the goal statement. It isn't about verification of ratios. It's really about the board will better understand the planning needs and enrollment needs of students to support inventory of staffing needs and organizational structures. That's really how you want to
That makes sense.
say the goal.
take that up for us.
Can we,
I really shouldn't have done
That's
that.
because there's many factors that go into that.
Sure.
It's not just about the ratio. And that's what I think maybe you're reacting to. I know I'm reacting to that.
Because
So-
and then having it put within the financial line, again, it puts a price tag on it, and it makes it so that then we're looking at teachers, we're looking at salaries, we're looking at whether or not we're getting the biggest bang for our buck with making sure if we have one teacher who has a lower student ratio than another teacher, then we're gonna start rejiggering things, and we're not gonna have our strongest teachers teaching what they love to do. It muddies the water.
can we agree to modifying the statement to what Dr. Wilson's suggesting? Would that be a compromise? We will receive that kind of information. We can have a rich discussion about
And you might get
why is this
other,
class offered and who's in that class and get specific information.
We're not gonna get down in the minutia of these courses. I certainly hope
with the
that's not what you're thinking here, because that is not the board's role. It clearly is not the board's role.
Well, I
no,
don't
but
know
this
about
is,
student ratio.
this is part of planning. This is not an action, this is a goal.
Right.
It's a goal statement, but in my mind, you start off with the wrong premise here. It's really around, I think what Jennifer was trying to get to, it's, the board wants to better understand the planning needs of students to support the staffing and organizational structure. And to better understand it, you're gonna do a lot of different things. It might be this enrollment report, it might be student-staff ratios, it might be something else. But there'll be other things to feed into that goal. I think it makes it clear, and I think it helps solidify what you're actually looking to do.
Yes, no?
Great, I like it.
Ken?
Great,
Yes?
go with it.
And you want it under financial and not planning?
No,
I
it
like
can
to
go under
under.
planning. It
Yeah,
can go
it's
under
a
planning
planning.
because it's planning, but it also, I mean, it can
Broad
go either
enough.
way. It doesn't matter to me.
Number 6.
Any others, and then we're gonna start to vote. Yes? Lee?
So, I know I was only able to attend part of one of the workshops.
As you were locked out.
Yeah, and I was locked out, so I apologize. So you guys may have hashed through this already, and if you have, forgive me, but I'm struggling with goal number 5 under financial. Board will cooperate with the business office / superintendent to prepare a line-by-line default budget for the 2019-20 fiscal year. When I read that, I get the impression that the business office is gonna develop it and we'll cooperate with them as they need us to cooperate.
It's backwards.
Yeah, and it's our budget, we prepare it. and we get assistance from the business office.
Last year, one person did an excellent job, but one person developed that budget, and none of us got a chance to do, and it had a lot of line by lines, and maybe Brian did too. But Kim worked really hard on that with her own financial wizardry, and we were like, what? We didn't feel until the end that we had much input into that. And
I disagree. There was 5 people that voted for that.
Well, and, God, I gotta hate.
I didn't vote for
I hate
it
bringing
because I
up-
didn't understand what we were voting for.
I hate bringing up old stuff, but it's the first time in Timberlane's history there was any discussion about default budget at all. Because every other year, they spent
Hear,
about
hear.
15 to 10 seconds.
Right.
And it wasn't done. Someone came in and said, and they went, done.
And I want it
And
line
no
by
one
line.
understood what was in there.
Right. I want it line by line. I agree with that. But I think our business department needs to be involved in that.
I,
So we don't
absolutely.
get
That's where I'm
where
going.
he
I don't-
is right
Absolutely.
now. The poor guy is like, what do I
Backwards.
start with?
It's just backwards, because.
What do you want it to say?
Here-
Well, just
I
that
had- I
the
already wrote
default
it out.
budget is the school board budget.
So
It's the school board's default.
the
So
board,
you want Kim and Brian to do it again?
no, listen.
God, no.
I want to change it to the board will create a line-by-line default budget for the 2019-20 fiscal year with the assistance of the business office as
Perfect.
necessary.
That's fine.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
With the assistance of the business office?
As necessary.
With consultation.
Perfect, great.
You need his
Assistance,
assistance.
consultant.
We do.
It's fine.
That's consultation. I mean,
Assistance of the business office.
I'll tell you why I chose assistance, right? Because I thought about consultation as well. Consultation, it's, hey, Jeff, what do you think? Assistance is, hey, Jeff, we need this.
I think assistance is a stronger term, too.
okay.
Are you getting this, Kathy? As you're trying hard, I know. It's 9:31.
I'm sorry?
So,
Riveting, yes, got it. Thank you, I got it.
we could have done it in the hot library,
Been more fun. Oh my God.
Don't know what you missed.
high school. But the board will create a line-by-line default.
You said create or develop? Oh,
Will
please
create
develop.
Create.
a line-by-line default budget
Create,
for the 2019-20 fiscal year,
yeah, with the assistance of
With
the
the
business
assistance
office.
of,
the business office as necessary.
We're adding as necessary?
oh, don't put necessary. I can't agree with necessary. We need
You don't
him.
need that.
Not as
You
necessary.
don't need it as necessary.
Okay.
We need him,
Yeah.
Okay.
so that we can understand what we're voting on.
Can I read mine one more time?
I think I got it,
I
though.
think we got it.
I think,
How's this? The board will better understand the program and enrollment needs of the schools in order to support staffing and organizational structure.
I would vote for that. That makes sense.
Does that capture?
It's a little bit, yes. I,
What did you have?
Not that.
we can vote on these.
So I'll just get it from you.
Okay,
One of them all.
all right.
One of them all at once. I think.
Are you in favor of voting these all now at once, now that we've kind of hashed some of this
I think
out? I was concerned we'd have to vote one at a time. I'd really like to move these along if we can.
I think they were all pretty well hashed out.
Yes, Jen?
Make a motion to accept school board goals as amended.
Second.
I'm going to let Kim have that second, if you don't mind, Lee. Thank
No,
you.
not at all.
If there's no other discussion,
Can I just get one clarification piece, please? And that is on planning number 2. You did strike that, correct? You
We struck
discussed
number
it,
2.
But then you,
and like, we'd already done that, so
okay, that's what I thought, but then there was
take it
the-
off.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of the Timberlane Regional School Board goals for 18-19 as amended? 7? Opposed? Abstaining? 1. Thank you. 9:34. I would like to move some things along if we can, because I should be leaving, and I don't want to leave you in the lurch here, although I think Brian could handle the rest of the meeting without me. So let's see if we can get through these policies. We got two policies here for first read, and I was kind of surprised this one came back around again. I thought we had tabled this, but one of them is the DJE bidding requirement, and it had gone back to policy. where we had quite a discussion. And I thought we had said we needed to get some more, I'd like some more research on that. Jen brought up, Jen brought up a very good point that many other school districts don't have the term superintendent reserving the right to reject that particular phrasing. And I'd like to do a little research on, okay, so who does it which way? What are other schools do?
Do you want me to list the towns for you that I know so far?
If you want to do that now, or we can send this back again.
I really don't want to get into a discussion there again. The way that I was spoken to was pretty condescending.
So you want to move this one along?
Yep.
And you want to tell the
Well, I have not looked at every single town in the
I know.
state of New Hampshire.
Okay.
Auburn, Alton, Manchester, Bedford, Bow, Bath, Cantick, Chester, Chesterfield, Chichester, Pembroke, Deerfield, Epsom, Salem, Epping, Newmarket, Merrimack, Farmington.
Okay, stop. So Merrimack and Salem, those are pretty big school systems.
As is Bedford, Manchester, Pelham, Goffstown. Wyndham says the board will. Wyndham's was interesting. Said the board with input from the superintendent.
And that's why I tried to compromise that day, but we couldn't seem to get past that.
And that the board can direct the superintendent to negotiate.
I like that.
But all those other towns, that paragraph is the same
The same
Same as what?
as the sample language.
as the sample language.
The board reserves the right to reject any or all bids and to accept that bid which appears to be in the best interest of the district.
That
The
sentence.
board reserves the right to waive any formalities in or reject any or all bids or any part of a bid. Any bid may be withdrawn prior to the scheduled time of the opening of the bids. Any bid received after the time and date specified shall not be considered. The board also reserves the right to negotiate with the bidder when all bids exceed the budgeted appropriation.
So Wyndham has the little addition of the board, and what did you say, board, and, I didn't look at
Board
Wyndham's.
with input from the superintendent.
With input.
And then the last sentence, Wyndham has, the board can direct the superintendent to negotiate with a bidder when all bids exceed the budgeted appropriation.
The board can direct.
Correct.
Could that be a compromise between it just being all on us?
It gives
But
some
it's-
good latitude.
What do you think, Brian?
What I'm thinking is that, I don't know why Wyndham has that, because it's already built into
The
it.
board can always do that.
The board can
Yes.
always do
Right,
that, so
right.
why would we even just go with the state recommended one? Because if we just, anything like transportation, like came up, we just say, do it.
We would just direct the
We
superintendent.
would direct the superintendent to do it.
Direct the
Right.
superintendent to negotiate and blah, blah,
And that's
blah,
what I
blah,
was
blah.
saying in
Yeah,
that committee
You would
meeting,
just do that.
Wasn't lit, yeah.
having the board reserve the right to negotiate doesn't mean the board will negotiate. It means the board can direct the superintendent to
Right.
negotiate. It doesn't take away
What
the
does it mean,
ability for the
negotiate?
superintendent to negotiate.
Well, you know, the transportation situation, you know, we're still waiting for buses. You know, we got a little behind there. We didn't get that stuff done early enough, and we haven't got the new buses yet. Still waiting for new buses.
Yeah, but I'm just, in that case, we let them do it.
Yeah.
The board didn't get involved in that, we just said,
Well,
do it.
we did a
I'd
little
like
bit.
to make a motion
I have one more.
to,
I have one more part that I want to maybe speak to adjusting. Okay.
You'll wait, Kim, I didn't hear you.
I'll
You'll
wait.
wait a second.
I'll wait
Okay,
for my
I'm sorry,
motion.
I
The-
can't.
The last sentence of that policy, the way we have it, says existing services that continue to meet the needs of the district shall be subject to an annual review and may not need to go out to bid. I don't completely disagree with that, but I would like that language clarified so that it can read the existing services that continue to meet the needs of the district will will require or will be subject to an annual review by the board.
So add in by the board.
Yes.
Because we did that with the food service.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember
think
that
that-
one?
Yeah,
Because I think the board should be made aware, if we're not going to put something out to bid, and it continues to meet the needs of the district, that's fine, but I think we should just be aware.
Yeah.
It's
We
on your
reviewed
table.
the service. Now, Kim, did you have something?
yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve this policy with the following amendments. In paragraph 3 and 4, we changed the word superintendent to school board. And in the last sentence, we add the words annual review by the board.
Wait, that's an extra.
Add in by the board after the words annual review.
Right. And in paragraphs 3 and 4,
Well-
we changed superintendent to school board.
Needs a discussion on you.
Why don't you do it up here as well?
Do we have a second on Kim's motion, and then we'll do some
We
discussion?
corrected the
A second
superintendent,
for discussion.
But it
Yeah,
should
there
be
was
the
a
board
one
that's
other
doing
piece that
it.
you guys
Everything's the
talked about.
board, and then you're,
Hey,
you can delegate it
Excluding?
then.
This has to do with
Do you think that,
envelopes.
hang on a second, do you
Hang
think
on.
that the first
Holding bids until.
superintendent, that should be the board? The board is required?
Where are you reading?
For the very first sentence, if you're putting all the onus on the board, with the responsibility on the board, so the first one would be is the superintendent is required to get written competitive bids. That should be the board. All of this can be delegated by the board to the superintendent, but that it's a conscious decision by the board to do such.
Well, let me read you the sample language. It,
Okay.
it kind of just takes that out of it. It just says, all contracts for and purchases of supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services in the amounts of, and then it goes
That
on.
language is perfect, because there's no ownership on that. It gets farther down with the ownership that Kim outlined.
So,
I have two comments.
Where do the bids go?
Who opens the bids? Who's,
Yeah.
who-
Where do the bids
Will the
go?
board?
who's
because the board's not gonna
negotiating?
meet.
well, the third
We gotta
paragraph
meet
says
because
all
there's a bid?
all bids will be submitted and addressed. I think submitted and addressed to the superintendent plainly marked, I think that's in the third paragraph there.
That's the default state recommended, or NHSBA recommended?
No, it's to the recommended
Look at it.
is addressed to the board.
But that's opposite what you said, Kim. The board doesn't want it. We don't want to get the, we don't want to get envelopes and
No,
bids.
that's not the opposite. The state language says board. In paragraphs 3 and 4, their language says board.
Yeah, but
That doesn't mean that you can't then delegate the superintendent to open those bids.
Why wouldn't you just say the
fine.
superintendent's gonna open the bids then? Why?
I'm fine with leaving superintendent for the
I'd leave
third
the
one.
superintendent in charge of the bids. I wouldn't.
Paragraph
Me
3
too.
anyway.
Paragraph 3, I'd leave it the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like Wyndham's statement, the board with input from the superintendent reserves the right. We certainly have the right to, but we need that, again, expert information, whether it's Jeff telling us or whether it's Tom telling us.
So you want to change paragraph 4 to read the board with
The
input.
board with input. I'm trying to look
I'm
for
more
a
comfortable
compromise here,
with that.
That's fine.
because having meetings to open bids,
No,
do that.
that's fine.
and of course, we direct him to do the work. You had a couple points, Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, because we've also worked with this policy in Hampstead as well. But two things. One is on your comment of the using the sample policies. I have found in the past, the sample policies are not best practice in all cases. And you have to look at them very carefully. So we never look at and grab onto the sample policies from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. It's one person's perspective, which I think it's really important that the board and the policy committees look at what does this do for our district? So that's one thing I just wanted to underscore. The second thing is in the people who do this work, mainly it's going to be your facilities coordinators, right? It's going to be your business office. It's going to be Tom Gary. They do all of this work in terms of the bidding. I can't tell you how many times things have to go out for a bid, but I also notice when they're coming in and how they have to be received. If there are certain things that we have to go out to bid for, this will slow down the process, no doubt, because your board meetings are only twice a month. So if the board becomes involved in this at this level, then it is going to slow down the work. So just be careful in terms of what you're thinking about in terms of process. And I would advise that if you're going to amend this and you're going to change some of those languages, you really need to have Mr. Gary here to look at some of this language.
But that third paragraph doesn't that third paragraph doesn't speak to how the bids are going out. It speaks to how the bids are coming in.
Right.
So I'm not suggesting that we slow up the process of putting things out to bid. I'm suggesting that that language in that fourth paragraph about the board having some input and some control over seeing the bids and what bids we want to accept or reject.
Which will mean we'd have to bring it to a board meeting ahead of time. So when these come in and we look at them pretty quickly, we can accept or reject, the next day. I mean, it's very fast. This case, we're gonna have to submit it to the board
Slows it down.
agenda, so it's gonna be another 2 weeks in most regards. So,
Only over certain dollar amounts.
if the bids are coming in, as stipulated in the language, is what I'm looking at.
This is for first read. I want us to go, there needs to be some more work on this so that we're comfortable with this. And
My concern is this has gone back and forth to policy committee, and policy committee is predominantly, the majority is the administration, and you know how that last meeting went.
I'm not a fan of sending it back. I would rather have it hashed out right here.
I'm not either. This is my suggestion before I make another motion, would be to
well,
change.
we've got a motion on the floor, don't we?
We do, but it
So you
wasn't
draw
ever
that motion.
completed. I mean, as far as,
I don't think was there a second? I don't think there
Yes,
was.
Jen
I
did.
seconded
Jen
for
did.
discussion.
I do withdraw.
I'll withdraw my
Withdraw it,
motion if you
yeah.
want to withdraw your
I'll withdraw my
second.
second.
So this is what I would like to do now, is we change that paragraph, number 4, and it said, to the board with input reserves the right to reject bids, and that we add in the last sentence, annual review by the board, and approve it for first read with those amendments. And then the next time we come back, because it's gonna require some language change, that on the second read, that we amend that first paragraph to take the superintendent out. Just make it general, like the New Hampshire School Board Association. That way we get the first read done and we make those changes, and then the more wordy
And it-
change we
and
make
it
where
gives
do
you
you-
some
next time.
time to
So
make
where do you
some.
see, where, under that thinking, where are the bids and envelopes going?
Third paragraph.
They're
The
paragraph.
Addressed to the
superintendent.
superintendent.
We're only
Okay, good.
changing the 4th paragraph. To
Oh,
say the
oh.
board with input reserves the right.
Or why not just
Input
change the first one to
from-
say that the district
input
is
from who?
The
required?
Oh,
superintendent.
yeah, we
I
could,
didn't
yeah,
hear that
well,
part.
we could do that, and change Jen's saying just change the first line to say the district is required.
Where?
I mean,
The first sentence, instead of saying the superintendent is required, the district? Did we say that?
Who
I
is
don't
the
know if we
district?
can-
Who is
Right.
the
I
entity?
wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I would leave
think
that
we
as
should.
is.
I think we should leave that till next time and come in with.
And
a-
let's just, I kind of
Wasn't
agree
there
with
one that
Kim.
said all
Let's
competitive bids? Did you have, Jen?
do paragraph 4.
Kim's saying just wait on.
So the motion I'm hearing from Kim, yes?
Yes,
You
it's-
making a motion?
I'm making a motion to accept this as a first read with the change to paragraph 4 to replace the superintendent with the words "the board with input from the superintendent." So that's a change 1. And change 2, in the last line, after the word annual review, add the words "by the board."
Just for clarification, Kim, in that fourth paragraph, you want every word says superintendent
Yes.
to say board,
Yes,
and then add in that very first one,
yes,
the board with input from the superintendent.
right.
so you don't want with input from the superintendent on the second replacement?
What about the second sentence?
And-
The
but you already-
superintendent
but you-
reserves the rights. You want it, the board reserves the right with input from the superintendent?
Yeah, why don't we just make the board with input?
Why don't, any place it
Superintendent.
just says superintendent, have it say board with
In,
superintendent.
within paragraph
Are
3.
you okay
Yeah,
with
in
that?
paragraph 4.
Paragraph
Paragraph 4 only is what Kim is referring to, and then the last sentence in the policy, annual review by the board, right? Okay,
Yeah. Got it. And did someone second that?
and we need a second.
Second.
Second from Jen. This is the first read, so go home, think about it, get on to New Hampshire school boards, go over and read Wyndham's, grab onto Merrimack's, try to pick a school that isn't, no offense, the school I came from for Northwood is quite a smaller school, so you probably they probably don't have so many large bids. So look at a school that you think kind of compares district to district. So, hearing no other discussion, I'm closing the discussion about DJE and calling for a vote. You understand the vote? This is to move it from first read with these changes to second read. All those in favor? That's 7. Opposed? Abstained? 1. 701. All right, the next one is professional. My right is here. Professional staff hiring, GCF. This one went back too, I think. And we modified the third paragraph, right? Jen?
Yes.
Yeah. And I can't even remember. Oh, yeah, you can see the change.
That
We changed.
That language
Right.
was hotly debated here around the table. I think it was in the spring, or at some point. And there were a few different interpretations of it, and I thought it would be helpful just to
Yeah,
clean that up a little bit,
yeah.
so we don't run into that again.
And the committee was fine with this one, right? Yeah. Fine as fine as they could be. So, if you want to look at this one over and do the same thing. Motion to accept this for first read, someone?
So moved.
So Lee, second by, did I hear Kim?
Yep.
Kim, a second, and move it on to second read, yes? Okay, all those in favor? 7, Kim, are you voting? Yes, 7, 0, 1, abstention, thank you. And now we're at administrators report, thank you, sir. Anything, Dr.
Yes.
Wilson?
Procedural update. There is we are bound to notify you when we change procedure. It's not that you have to approve it, but we have to at least notify you. So we did look at procedure ACAA-R, and that's harassment and sexual harassment complaint procedure for students.
That's here in the packet, by the
Right.
way.
And I believe that was also reviewed by our attorney, which is what we were hoping to have accomplished. So I wanted you to know that's in there.
Do you know what the changes, were there any highlighted changes, or?
I don't know, because I haven't been I just know that when the procedures are done, I mean,
Okay.
if
It's
you-
already happened.
Yeah,
It's happening.
No, I was just wondering if we knew what was different, that's all.
I can't highlight it for you.
Okay.
It's all right.
There's also in your packets, a report from Primex regarding the safety of the athletic track and the cost estimate from the track company. I think maybe you had asked for that earlier on. The information was requested by the board for future planning purposes, so Primex is requiring the district to address the recommendations cited in their letter, so it's there for your
Take it home,
edification.
look it over. Let's not discuss it tonight
Okay.
without having looked it over, please. And we'll make sure that this becomes something we talk about after you've had a chance to digest a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
All right, makes sense to me.
And just to inform you again, the facilities tours that are going on have been announced, and I guess this is with the Budget Committee as well, October 1st, the 15th, and the 29th, starting at 4 p.m. The tours are typically a joint venture with the Budget Committee and the School Board and the Facilities Committee. The announcement with specific about location is posted to the district website and to the district calendar. The public is invited to attend these tours, which are expected to run approximately 30 minutes. And you do learn a lot when you attend those.
So there's a
Tours.
one in your packet, if you want to put that on your fridge or on the dashboard of your car. Or in your calendar that's on your phone thing, Mr. Dugan.
And there's I didn't see this.
Yeah, that's in there.
That's all I have.
We have a personnel report.
No personnel report.
Reports of the school board or committee reports? Anyone? Kim?
Oh.
Sean?
No, but I would like to say that the two former school board members were on the personnel committee, and that's a contract negotiation, and I think we're gonna need to appoint
Right.
people.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping when we had a full board. We did not have a meeting tonight. The lawyer canceled the negotiations tonight, which is, you know, happened. We had planned enough, I believe, the calendar, so there's no emergency that we had to have tonight, so I think we're fine. But I hear what you're saying. I'm hoping that we can get that sorted out. It's the times they meet. I reached out to a couple of people to see if they want, and they can't, it's 4 to 6. So, it puts it down to, it makes it hard it's gotta be Brian or Sean, or perhaps the new member, because Kim's trying to get home.
And there's a few all-day sessions.
And there's a couple, yes, I forgot, there's a couple all-day sessions
Starts at
to
8
be
a.m.
there, at the times. I mean, they set these dates far ahead of time, so we've gotta work something out here. But I appreciate that. It's the same thing with a few other committees. We've got to kind of work through things and make sure that we have some coverage, so that we don't have a time when we can't have the meeting because we don't have enough of us there. But I appreciate your thought, Sean, but if anyone wants to shoot me an email with, certainly Kim has volunteered, any other things you think you can do, I'd appreciate that. We've got policy the 4th, CIP the 2nd, right? We have school board training next week, 26th. We have SAU board the 3rd, so we've got some things coming up here, if we want to put all of those in your calendar. Any other people have committee reports? Brian?
I
Budcom,
need some
probably.
input from our board. We have our big budget, the school board budget is going to be in front of the budget committee. So, I think the only thing that I know of, and we talked about this a little bit last year, because obviously it's our big salaries, you know, and then we have some money there for Kathy Belcher. But there's monies in there that we talked briefly about that we give to the students. You know, people come in, and I personally would like to see any money that's in our activity fund right now go right to whatever the student activity fund is. So they have money in the high school, and we have some money, and they've come, if you remember, 2 or 3 times last year that people come in front of the board, and and I would say, based on my whopping 1-year experience, it was a first come, first serve. So I'd rather see it go down to, if that's what, the high school, and let them handle it when they handle everything else, versus this board trying to second guess what's going on there.
I think that was kind of what I spoke to a little bit last meeting about, how can we support those academic student groups, like we support the music group, the athletic groups, to be able to do some of their own fundraising. I don't know how, does the honor societies, do they do some of that too?
Yeah. we do independent
So, you know,
fundraising.
how do we support some of those other, like the groups that Mr. Richmond takes and the Destination Imagination?
Right.
I'm just thinking of some of those groups that have come here before us. Do they have a mechanism in place to do that?
Do they make like
To
a
be able
booster
to-
club kind of thing?
Yes.
That's a good question.
But we've also suggested that they add those to the budgets. This is the budget cycle where they need to add it in for next year.
Right.
So to continually have to come.
That's why.
Right,
need
so it's
to
like, I
add-
feel like it's like a
Yeah.
just like athletics, we add it to the budget, and then they also have their.
But we
fun-
need to explain it, and then we get, well, why is it going up $2,000? So we explain it for student activities. Sometimes it makes it through the budget cycle, sometimes it doesn't.
And I guess I'd rather see it, whatever, because they already have some of it in budget, but there's some under our purview.
Well,
We can,
but
Which-
we've been able to give away a little bit.
are you talking about the 2319-890 line, the miscellaneous expenses under the school board line? And
What, how much was that? How much is that?
Does that,
25,000?
is that,
No, then that's one heck of a trip.
Like 5,000.
No, that's
That
what's
needs,
under
that needs
this
school
line.
board,
No.
people to go with them then.
Right, no, there is quite a bit of money under the school board line, and we spent money. We spent, for the consultant last year, we funded
That's
at
right.
least 3 or 4,
yeah,
so
that's
that's
where
not.
we paid
I-
for that.
You're asking us to move to take money out of our line, but you're not telling us how much.
Okay, the only money, I guess, let me rephrase this. The only money I was trying to move, I thought would make sense, is the money that, I think we did it 3 times last year. The 3 groups came in and we funded them, maybe one was $500, one was $2,000 or $3,000.
Where did we take that
Right.
money from?
Well,
It must have come out of that
If
line.
it came out of miscellaneous, I don't know where that came.
We need to find out where it came
Wherever
out
they
of,
could
because
find it
there's
in
a-
our
Maybe,
there are a
okay,
whole
I'll
bunch of
check with
lines
Jeff, see where
under
they
here.
came out of, because I'm trying to take the board out of that. I'm trying to get it back.
I agree with you, we just need to, you need
Find
to
out where they took it
specifically
from.
know which
Because I remember
line
when
it
we
is.
did that, Kim, and I said, so that'll come out of miscellaneous, and Jeff said kind of no. So
Gonna find it.
I
Kim was
remember
gonna find
asking
it.
where they were taking it
Because I
from.
think you'd already spent it all,
Yeah.
that's why. you
Okay,
need
Oh, we
to-
didn't have any money in that
That's
line.
right, we didn't, because we spent a lot of money out of that.
What's our
line.
total-
That was
And
the
what's our total,
strategic
what's
plan.
our total budget?
25.
The total budget, other school board services
Everything.
is 58,721, because that includes, it says office
Salaries.
salaries, technical services, advertising, travel, dues and fees, miscellaneous expenses.
To our, like, school board association
Yeah.
dues.
Yeah, yeah,
So
well,
that's-
I understand, we need the bulk of that, so.
Can
but-
we direct, no, yes, Bruce.
Brian, let me
Brian, Brian, see, it's 10 o'clock, I'm done. Brian, to speak with Jeff about where we could tweak that a little bit and get it over to the high school activities fund in budgeting. But remember, the budgeting is not right now, it's us, so we're gonna
Yeah,
have them come to us this year. Probably. So it, you're always almost 2 years down the road here.
Yeah.
Okay, go, so we okay with that?
okay, we'll see what you.
Bruce
okay.
will speak to Jeff, it'll be great.
All righty then.
Okay, committees, I didn't do anything this week, much. But next week, we got all these things. We do have the need for a non-public, and I'm gonna ask to be,
Short.
short.
Can I just, can we do other?
If you've got other, short.
Yeah, just, I just want to, ask that we can discuss that busing study that was presented to us in the spring.
Right, we'd like to have that on an agenda, and also the bullying procedures.
I thought that was already on the
Next week,
agenda.
It
isn't
is for next meeting, I just want to rephrase that. We'd like those up and coming, please. A discussion about transportation again, and
On the next,
it is on the
it's on
next one.
October 4th.
Yeah.
We have a tentative date of October 4th for that
For
one.
transportation?
Transportation update as
Transportation.
well as bullying procedure.
And we put bullying there, okay?
Thank you.
I have something too, Sue.
Yes, sir.
Is, you did touch on it earlier in regards to 10-3 is our SAU meeting.
Yes,
I would actually like to make a motion that we are actually recording and broadcasting that meeting to our constituents.
okay, we can, you know the situation, we can do it to our towns, but it won't get sent out to Hampstead. It's a completely different network over there.
This is all of our equipment. This is,
But it doesn't get broadcast to Hampstead.
that's.
They can watch
I
online
understand that. That's, we live stream. They
to
can
our
offer.
4 towns.
We live
anybody.
stream to anybody with an internet
The
connection.
live stream is everybody, but this, what we're seeing right now, is only going to our 4 communities. You understand
Over
that?
cable, and it's also live streamed to anybody on the internet.
Yes, I understand that. I just wanted to make sure you understood.
No,
We can't.
I do. What I don't want to have is, or at least I personally don't want to see, is that our live meeting is not broadcast over live stream because Hampstead feels that they,
Didn't we live stream it last time?
no, we did not.
Have you taken it up with the SAU board?
I don't think we need to take it
We
up
don't
with
need
the
to
SAU
take it
board.
out.
Authorize the SAU board to have their meeting recorded a certain way. That's.
They'll
No,
record
this
it.
is, it's not recorded, it is being broadcast. It's a simple
Yeah.
flip
Did
of
we
a
not
switch.
because, well, I don't think it's quite that
No.
switchy,
Yes, it is quite
switchy
that
thing.
simple.
No, it's
Okay,
a
Dean's
board
here, he could tell
authority.
you.
Yeah.
Well, bottom line is that you're asking a question, the Timberlane School Board cannot override the SAU board.
This is
Period.
our equipment.
Doesn't matter. I know who owns equipment, but you're asking to broadcast the SAU meeting.
Correct, it's a public meeting.
I understand.
So you put it on the
But
agenda.
it came up, and and by vote, it came up and it didn't happen. It came up to the SAU board and it didn't happen.
Well, I think we should make that motion
Because we
right
didn't
at the
have the
beginning of the
cable
next
pass.
meeting. Maybe
That's
we'll
all you can
pass
do, but
this
it
time.
has to happen at the SAU meeting.
Reach out to the chairman. We are
Would
not
that be
the
the
chairman.
chairman that doesn't answer his emails?
I'm sorry about that.
Well,
So am I.
I do think logistically, I just don't know how you can do that legally.
We're using our equipment to record it.
It's irrelevant whose equipment it is. It's,
I don't agree that it's
So
irrelevant.
what would happen if we had this meeting in Hampstead,
That'd be fine.
which we could?
I'm always up for transparency and broadcasting.
I don't care where it
No,
is.
in
but
Hampstead, we can't live stream.
They don't
We
live
don't have
stream it.
the
They don't have
ability
the
to live
equipment.
stream. So what I'm saying is, the SAU board happens to meet here, but it's its own entity. And,
Right.
you need to have this discussion with the SAU board for future reference. But if we happen to have an SAU meeting in Hampstead, we will not be able to live stream at all, because we don't have the capability. Huh?
It's a good thing we have it here then.
Well,
Yeah,
yes, it is.
but the rest of the Timberline community is disenfranchised.
They have the same ability as Hampstead has
Well-
in terms of watching it on video after the fact.
No,
But if
because
it's
they can,
live streamed, Hampstead has the same ability as Timberlane to go online and watch it.
exactly.
Well, they do. And
They do.
And the thing is, I guess if 8 of us think it should happen at that meeting, it will happen.
Right.
It's an SAU question. So if 8 say, we're gonna do it, that's what's gonna happen. Well, whoever the majority is that night.
Right. If we're able to live stream.
Right.
I mean, yes.
No, I mean, whatever can happen in this room, this group, I understand, does not have the authority to make a decision for the SAU board.
Well, and that's the point that I was trying to make.
And you run into issues too. Is there another event that's being live streamed at the same time as that meeting?
And that's happened before too. We were live streaming a concert or something and it conflicted with a meeting. They're gonna live stream our kids in a play or in a musical or whatever they're doing before they're gonna live stream the scintillating SAU board meeting. Anything else? Jen, yes?
I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, we talked about signage, the Sandown Central, the backlit LED, and I think you said Plastow sign was not lit, Danville's sign is not lit.
It's lit if you consider these 2 little solar lights that kind of hang down. But it's not an arrow with, they have things in plaster
I
that
just-
don't allow you to do that.
How'd that go?
I just wanted, the only town that we didn't have feedback from that
was
night
Atkinson.
was Atkinson.
Oh, so sorry.
I was just going to say, as I've been driving by at night, I've noticed Atkinson's sign is not lit.
Not lit.
Not lit.
All right. Ours is like.
Get your solar lights.
So, well, I don't think anybody else is lit either.
I'm telling you, I drove through Sandown coming back from camping, and the library in Sandown had some light on it. And where that sign is, the sign's like this, by the way. I figured by the time, no, at the school. By the time we make a decision about that sign, it's gonna be in the ground anyway. It's in terrible, terrible, terrible
Before
shape.
zoning recently, weren't they?
Right.
No, but I was just making the point that, personally, I don't know why they needed an LED backlit sign.
I know too, I know.
Did you get
I don't know why it came up that way, but.
Because no other elementary school has.
But the pizza place down further in Sandown was lit up. The pizza place was
Okay.
awesome. So, good point. we will, I don't think we're doing the sign right away anyway. Okay. Anything else? Because I'd like to call for a non-public. We have House Bill 1612, is it? It's 1612, so, on a non-public under,
Can I just add one thing? Did
Under-
we ever resolve the legal file issue so that people that work during the day can look at the legal letters that are sent out that we're not aware of?
did anybody come in and look at the legal file,
Oh, I can't.
other than me?
That folder's supposed to be, last we agreed, it's supposed to be here.
No, it's
No,
not.
we didn't agree.
No, we didn't agree.
We didn't agree.
We had to get a legal opinion as to whether we could legally have it here.
I'm taking from that tone that we don't have that legal opinion yet, but I will work on that.
I don't know if we do. I wouldn't know if we
I
had
don't know
that
either.
legal opinion.
I don't know.
Hope you would know.
I don't know.
Do we know from our office, city
Office?
office?
Are you taking notes?
She's saying no, so, I'll work on that next week.
He's not gonna get it?
But I told you how many things were in that file,
I can make you a new one.
and, it has been available.
Right, and was the one thing that is in it, the one that we got this week?
No,
So that means that
Yeah.
not everything's in that file.
Yeah.
I told you what was in there. I gave you, pretty much
I know.
told you what was in there.
I know, but what's concerning is that, you
What
know,
we
we got an email
received-
this week within the last 2 days.
Yeah,
and you're telling
yesterday,
me that wasn't in there.
late last night, like 10:49, is that what you're
Okay,
referring
yes,
to?
and that one's not in there.
Is it in the, correspondence?
But why isn't it in a legal folder?
It's not addressed to us,
But
it's not
it
written by us,
references-
we didn't authorize it.
Is there a legal folder? Is there a legal folder?
Yes, it's yellow.
It's called a read-only.
Just give
file.
up. Read on
Called a real, read-only legal file.
But it was a legal letter that our district paid for
Correct.
that should be in that read-only file.
I,
There's no reason that we shouldn't be
wasn't
able
in
to see
there, I wasn't here at 10:49 last night,
that.
so
That letter was dated,
August 1st.
right. That should be in there.
When I looked at the file, it was not in there. Doesn't mean it isn't now, but. All right, I'd like to go into non-public, under, it's gonna be the safety one, right? Which
Well,
one
it's
is
a
that?
safety one, but it's relative. I don't know if we actually have one that talks
G?
about it.
No, that's correctional facilities.
No, there was one-
That's what I'd like to have then.
Inmates and prisoners.
It's not C,
It's emergency.
Aye.
I don't know
it's
which one.
emergency stuff.
Yeah,
Aye?
so I guess it would be
Aye.
urgent.
Aye.
I,
Yeah.
under
aye.
I, 91A, paragraph, et cetera, I.
Second.
Thank
Oh,
you.
did someone motion that?
I did.
I'm sorry, so.
Trying. And we're not coming back for any other business.
Silva.
We will adjourn after this. I don't expect any action.
Actually, I do.
You need action?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna ask for action.
You can leave. That's all this is. You wanna leave?
I'd like to be excused if I could.
I think you're more than capable. You can knock yourself out.
No, I'd rather not knock myself out, but, so let's poll the board, and then I'll leave when as others leave.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Doobie,
Yes?
Dr. Farah,
Yes.
Mrs. Markham,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Savage,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman.
Yes.
Mrs. Silva.
Yes. I'll be right
They're
back.
all in. And the time is
Do we need to keep
10:13.
Dean then?
Okay, we're back, 10:24. We've come out of a non-public. It looks like a lot of the information that we were talked about it was really not necessary to stay in a non-public, so we've come back to talk about this topic here. Senate, House Bill 1612. So,
Do you want me to start over? Or do
if you
wanna
just give a quick, just a
Yeah,
quick.
so House
summary.
Bill 1612 was passed in June. It's a state mandated law that we have to comply with. What we need to comply with is an inventory of our online applications. They have to meet certain standards. We need to have a data and security audit, and we need to come up with a response plan in the event of a data breach. So what I propose is bringing in a third-party vendor to help us out with, this is a massive amount of work to undertake, and to have a third party come in and help us. I've contacted 2 agencies. I've got a quote back from one, which I shared with you tonight. I'm sorry, it was a statement of work with a quote. I'm asking for $9,900 to not to exceed that amount, to engage in one of these companies and get the ball rolling, basically.
Great. Open up for any discussion.
Again, I feel this should be an SAU function because of obviously the overlap that we're gonna see here. I understand that each district is gonna have to do some of its own work on this, but I just don't know why we're not doing this as an SAU. And that's not directed to you.
No,
That's a more
I understand.
rhetorical question to the
I mean,
board.
yeah, no, I understand the question. I just think that they're just, even though we're in the same SAU, we're just so different with what we're doing. I mean, we share some systems. I grant you that, and they will have to be audited, those shared systems.
So we're gonna have an SAU bid, we're gonna have an SAU scope of work, a Timberlane scope of work, and a Hampstead scope of work. That's what we're gonna have?
No, I think we're gonna have a Timberlane and a Hampstead.
Well, then where's the SAU scope of work? 'Cause
SAU isn't a
Timberlane-
district. I think part of the issue is the language of the law talks about school districts. So, I think we're gonna be doing this by district, but that's gonna also look at, so what are some of the things that we do at the SAU level as
So
well?
who's paying for the SAU level?
When I read this, it says student and teacher information, but I don't know that the SAU has students or teachers.
Right, that's what I was just gonna, yep.
That's correct.
But they have the access to the
Don't
information.
you
They have the
access?
data.
They have the data.
So like our financial systems,
It says
our
student
free
and
and
employee.
reduced systems.
They're all on the
Not
Timberlane
just
Yeah,
system.
well, I was just gonna
student
say,
employee, so-
once you, I would think, do the work for Timberlane and do the work for Hampstead, the people who are at the SAU are gonna have
Best
one.
practices,
Practices,
right.
right.
Exactly.
For local
So there's
education
really no
agencies.
reason.
There's some
It's not a district.
cross-pollination,
It's every
maybe even a
agency.
little bit
Agency.
duplication. But we can talk to, if we engage with the same company, to Kim's point, we could, potentially get a better deal.
Well,
We're always trying to do that, and we've done that many times with Hampstead.
Well, the key thing, you're in front of the board here tonight, looking for a not to exceed to comply with a newly adopted House bill, which we really don't. We have to comply with the House bill.
Yeah.
So are we gonna, is something similar like this going to be presented to the SAU board as well for the SAU piece?
I wasn't planning on it.
I don't see what-
Again, the way the bill's written is more of a district level. I was not planning on bringing it to the SAU.
We could talk to
But
the
we can
business
talk,
office,
yeah.
get their opinion.
Yeah, that's not how I'm reading this either.
Is Hampstead's infrastructure, is it totally segregated from the Timberlane infrastructure? So there's no shared
The only
IT
thing-
resource within this
The
building?
only thing we share is, share is, it's a loose term, like we use the same system, but different databases.
Okay.
Right? So we have a financial application, they have their own database, we have our database. So it is
So there's a
possible in my
virtualiza-
mind.
virtual
Correct.
separation
We don't,
of the
right, correct.
infrastructure.
Like, in my mind, it makes sense to just have the Timberlane financial database part of Timberlane and have that audited, Hampstead have theirs audited.
Now I understand.
Again, the same application, but different databases.
And that makes sense, and that's
We're
an
always
easier way to
split,
bid it
and
out.
we're always split like that on all the systems we have.
But they're on the same server?
Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of it's cloud hosted, so, possibly. But the databases are separate with different security implemented. Different people access, of course, in different ways.
So it's almost delineated, but not quite. Close enough, I think. That you wouldn't be, because I know where you're getting at, Kim, it's
Oh,
kind of like
that's
a
the
double dip
Department
on the
of
work.
Education staff.
Yeah.
And if they're separate databases, then,
It's, yeah, I mean, it does seem that on the surface, but it's really not.
Yeah.
It's,
I get it now.
Okay, we good? We entertain a motion here to proceed with this?
I'll make that motion to authorize up to
10,000?
10,000 for this work.
I'll second.
Okay, any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Actually, do we need to direct Jeff to allocate those funds? It's not a budgeted item.
Wow.
I don't think we have to
Just a
direct them, I
given.
think that's kind of by
I'll find
default
it.
it's
Who
gonna happen.
seconded that?
I did.
Thank you, Sarah.
I don't think that's necessary. Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous?
Got it.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
people, thank you.
So you don't need this back, Ben?
I would like the statement of work back, please, just
You can
because
have it all back.
Oops, I doodled all over it.
They're all scribbled on.
It's all scribbled
Okay,
on.
thank you, I guess
Enjoy your
we're,
notes.
motion to adjourn?
Get the assessment.
Enjoy your notes.
Who wants the statement of work back?
I'm good, everything.
You can just adjourn it. Just adjourn it.
Adjourn, okay, we're adjourning. Dean, thanks for coming back.